Hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Is this working? Test. Wait, is this working? Testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2. Am I live? Is this working? Oh wait, there's like a 2-minute delay. Here early? I can? Hey, okay. That's great, that's great. Alright. You can hear? Nice and clear. Loud and clear, Captain. Alright. Thank you, Scarling. Okay. Alright. I'm gonna do a quick, just a quick mic check to make sure that the pop filter is actually working. So, fancy sitting device. That's me. Clearly not. Wait, hold on. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Is that popping? My favorite professor. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm armchair expert for a reason. This is gonna be... So yeah, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Balls. Sussy balls. That's I paid for that. Yes, you did. Oh, also, by the way, so just so you know, I didn't spend all of the super chats on just buying one pop filter. The rest is going into PC fund because I mean, just working on it, just streaming from a laptop is a little bit not optimal, not optimal. But don't worry about that because I have a day job as well and I'm saving up from that. Sounds good? Okay. Apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur. Oh, I have beanie. Yeah, I mean, we're just gonna chill for a little bit. So 10 minutes is up before I actually like start properly because I probably jumped a few people by starting like before 11. Also, the week that I've chosen to go away is kind of like this past week has been crazy. I expected you to say you bought multiple pop filters. Nah. I'm pretty sure you only need one, and if it's working well, then that's all I really need. But yeah, this past week has been crazy in terms of content. Like, we had what, like WrestleTubers? We had Niana concert. We had Rima Donathon. We had Sayu came out as a donkey, which was pretty cool. Then we had if you're a Phase Connect fan, you'll know about this. We had Irie Diagnosis, which was terminal, unfortunately. Scarling, calm with the PC font. So yeah, we had Irie Diagnosis. We had Uwu Apple Princess debut. If you don't watch Phase Connect, those words probably mean like nothing to you. But yeah, holy, this past week has been completely packed. Nietzsche doesn't want to stop. Yeah, I saw that. Oh, the cease and desist was such a mess. I was watching False ID cover the cease and desist and like read through it, and that sentence where they said, what was it? Something along the lines of our public image is a great benefit and asset to our lives, something along those lines, just fucking sent me. Rip, I swore within the first 10 minutes. I guess I'm getting shot now. But yeah, that was so funny. That was so funny. Oh, man. Oh, okay. I mean, I'm assuming you guys have been tuning into all of this stuff as well, right? Oh, there's gonna be like a 2 minute lag while I wait for you guys to respond. Even though my internet is like supposed to be way better, and even though it says like excellent connection on my end on OBS, it's still like I still have like a 1 minute lag between when I say something and when you guys like hear it, or when you guys send something in chat and when I see it. The C&D was just yeah. I wanted to ask if you know what happened with the tax issue Niji caused. I have no clue about that. Unfortunately. They have a reputation. Image? What image? That's what I'm saying. Yeah, their reputation is important to them. They're terrible at maintaining it outside of a country with no meaningful freedom of speech, but it's important to them. See, again, like that comes back to the thing that I was talking about with like my first 2 videos, which is basically if your audience is international, you would expect your staff to be as well, or at least like, you know, if they're not like from another country, they should at least have like basic knowledge of how to conduct yourself in front of people with different cultures and stuff. And like it just reeks of trying to apply one country's like worldview and way of doing things to every other country as well, which is destined to fail. Okay, it's I should be able to switch to main screen. Hello. Niji NBA Hollow got the MLB. Yeah, the NBA thing was really out of left field. Oh, also, by the way, this particular stream might be a little less coherent than normal because one, it's like it's something that's a little personal to me, but also it's a 60 slide presentation, so I'll be experiencing these with you guys since I'm a little low on sleep as well. Ooh, Apple Princess actually broke me. Did she raise the bar for being unhinged again? How did she raise the bar? Yeah. Hello, Armchair. Hello, Ardentop. Japan still kind of has a very imperial mindset. They want to try and force foreigners to play by Japanese rules, even when they're not in Japan. Yeah, but again, that doesn't really gel well with like just having a business or trying to run a business. We like Scarf, let's fucking go. Yep. Oh, I like how for the first like 5 minutes of stream, I was like trying not to swear, and then I said fuck once, and I've just thrown that out the window. Will you get VTuber? Oh yeah, so Shezen01 on Twitter made made a VTuber model, which is insane. So yeah, big shout out to Shezen01, but my current device cannot handle VTube Studio being open while I'm streaming. That's part of the reason why I'm currently saving up for PC. Again, just to reiterate, I have my day job, so like don't worry about that. But yeah, I will eventually at some point be getting a VTuber model, so don't worry about that. Get some sleep. It's okay. I'm not like depriving myself on purpose or anything. It's just I have insomnia. A lot of people do. But yeah. Alright. I might just give more people a chance to filter in. Maybe like 8 more minutes or so, something like that. Let's go. Oh no. Yeah. Oh yeah. I tricked Clara into saying 2 thumbs jump. Oh man. Hold on. Let me just get this done. All right. Yeah, insomnia does that. Yeah, insomnia is rough. It's not like I feel like insomnia is one of those conditions where it's like not actually a disability, but it approaches the level of inconveniencing your life that a disability can do. With your VTuber model, will you continue to be a talking armchair? I will continue to be a talking armchair. I'm going to commit to the bit. Are you about to talk about how unis / college in general, or just in the West and stuff? So my focus is going to be from the stuff that I've spoken to other people about, the stuff that I have receipts for. So it's going to revolve a lot around Australia, and as a result of that, in the West. But the other things that I talk about, like the main features that I'm going to be talking about when it comes to like how universities operate, the effects of their business model on, the students that sign up, that's going to be pretty universal, I would assume. I'm too old to learn new things. VTuber armchair. That's the dream. That's the dream. Okay, so. Also, Australia is technically West. Yeah. I mean, look, I say Australia is like technically West because of how much our culture and well, our government as well is like trying its best to skinwalk America, which in my opinion is not the best way to go, but it's just the way it is. So I do see Australia as like part of the West, even though like geographically maybe not. America Fed student loans raised the costs exponentially. Government at it again. Australia, the far, far west, yeah. Australia is culturally influenced by the UK. Yeah, I mean, we used to be a prison colony a few hundred years ago. Now that's a word I didn't expect. Skinwalking America. It's accurate though. It's accurate though, especially when you look at the way that we go about making our own media, the way that we go about like almost emulating the exact same sort of talking points as well. The place down under. Yep. Don't copy America right now. I think we have some personal growth to do. America is one of those countries where if it was personified into a person, you would want them to like grow and change as a person. That kind of defines a lot of American. It defines a lot of Australian history as well. Like our country's history is by no means like clean or sanitized. Yeah. I mean, right now we have. I mean, I think we have enough people to start, to be honest. So, um, yeah. All right. Let me just mute the music because I tend to get distracted when I have music playing while I'm talking. All right. So, okay. Before I begin this stream, a few disclaimers. Um, First of all, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in terms of the evidence, in terms of evidence for the problems that I'm about to discuss and stuff like that, a lot of it is going to be anecdotal and alleged. Reason being that a lot of the people who've approached me to tell me their experiences are very reasonably quite concerned about retaliation. On top of that, I also want to really emphasize this is not journalism. This is not going to be journalism. I don't have a lot of respect for journalism, but I still feel like it's important to declare that I don't intend for this to be interpreted as journalism. And also because a lot of the information that I'm about to show you guys, I have already sent off to multiple news stations, none of which ever got back to me. So, again, I don't think it qualifies as news, not quite. And, well, I mean, you know what they say. If other people don't share your concerns, just express them yourself. And that's what I'm going to be trying to do. So, on this channel, we are no strangers to exploitative corporations, exploitative industries, exploitative institutions. And we're going to be talking about an industry that sells itself mainly off of prestige, the prospect of a stable future, and a bright career to people who have nowhere to go. And that institution is higher education. If you're in America, you call it college. In Australia, we call it university. So I'm going to be referring to it as uni. Now, I want to start this off by just telling you a little bit of a personal story about how I got into university. So, in Australia, like with a lot of other countries, at the end of high school you take a standardized exam, or a series of standardized exams. You get to pick the subjects, but at the end of the day, what happens is, the scores that you get from your various exams all get funneled into what's called the University Admissions Center, which is basically an organization that has a bunch of wizards that crunch the numbers and turn all of those exam results into a single number, a rank that is supposed to, place you among the other high school graduates in your state that determines how, susceptible you are to higher education. The higher your number, the more courses become available to you. The more courses you can enroll by simply just signing up. I happen to get a pretty high number, and as a result of this high number, I was invited to participate in my university's scholar program. And just to make sure you didn't mishear that, scholars program, not scholarship program. I wasn't getting any money for being a part of this. Basically, what this was a group of high school high achievers that they put together, and we were going to be given a title of being like a scholar of some sort, and also we were supposed to have certain subjects, certain units available to us that supposedly nobody else had access to, right? So, again, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind, right? On the day, so they scheduled our induction into this scholars program in early January of our first year, and we don't start uni until like February for most people. So, when we were invited to attend this induction, this was basically supposed to just be like a casual, almost kind of meet and greet, where you would get to interact with other people who were also in this program. And as a result of that, they were going to offer like free champagne throughout, because it was assumed that everyone was at this point like above 18 years old. Free champagne and like finger foods, so like biscuits and maybe a sandwich, right? So, this was, for many of us, our first time setting foot on campus properly, like as a student that was going to be there to study, right? So this was our first taste of university life. And this was also our first opportunity to meet these other people who were supposedly just as interested in academia, just as driven as we were. So understandably, a lot of people would have been really excited, a little overexcited to attend this event. Now, over the course of my university degree, I have done quite a few things. Some things I tolerate in hindsight. Some things I'm not quite proud of. But one thing that I will always be proud of is the fact that when I went to this induction event, I just went in a pair of chinos and like a normal button-up shirt. Unlike some other poor fucks that went dressed in like a full-on suit. So, and the reason why that was such a bad decision is because, for some fucking reason, they'd chosen to schedule this in the middle of Australian summer. And it doesn't matter if you're from Australia or not, you know what Australian summer is like, right? So I want you to picture this in your head. A bunch of young, hot-blooded, 18, 19-year-olds all gathered together, drinking, getting a little tipsy. Some of them are woefully overdressed for the climate. And they tell us that at some point they tell us, okay, now I want you guys to file into the auditorium so we can conduct the induction ceremony, right? And as we were walking into this auditorium, imagine our surprise when we looked around the room and we came to the grim realization that, except for the stage at the front where all the speakers were seated, there was not a single chair in that fucking room. And imagine our dawning horror as we looked up and realized that there wasn't any proper air conditioning either. So, and again, because a lot of people were tipsy, a lot of people were excited, there wasn't like a big fuss about this. We just kind of filed in and resigned ourselves, right? So you had over 100 of over 100 of us crammed into this auditorium without air conditioning in the afternoon of an Australian summer day, standing shoulder to shoulder. And at the front, then you get your shriveled professors, your jaded alumni, your deadpan academia staff, like the dean or the vice chancellor or something. And they were moving up to the front, moving up to the podium so they could, give us a lecture about, what an opportunity we've had granted upon us. How proud we should feel that we were there. How rare it is for someone to make it into this scholars program. And about halfway through the entire thing, when the third or fourth speaker had gone up to the podium, and after they had said a few words, from the back of the room, we hear this. Some poor girl had just fainted from the heat and collapsed on the spot. Now, obviously, there were people who, escorted her out of the building to, check up on her and make sure she was okay. And the speeches ended pretty soon after that. And I tell you this story not because I want to flex that I made it into some program or whatever, but to really hammer home one really important idea that I want you to keep in the back of your mind throughout the entirety of this stream. And that is that academia, regardless of how much it tries to gas you up, regardless of how prestigious it makes itself out to be, or how prestigious it tries to make you feel for being a part of it, academia doesn't give a shit about you. It doesn't matter if you're a student, a tutor, or even a professor. They just don't care. Academia is, at its core, as it exists right now, an industry. It's designed to churn out graduates and degrees. If you succeed, they'll pat you on the ass, invite you back so that you can inspire more people to enroll. If you don't, then they'll just wash their hands of you. I said this in my last stream, but academia is like Ouroboros, except instead of a snake eating its own tail, it's a man filleting himself. Because it is among the most self-congratulatory of institutions I have ever personally experienced. So, academia doesn't care about a lot. It doesn't really care about its staff, doesn't really care about its students. But there is one thing that academia does tend to care about, and that is media attention. Now, this is going to be I'm going to go on a tiny tangent about just the way that media coverage works in general. So, in Australia, right, news coverage about universities tends to fall into trends, right? There'll be certain subjects that get talked about a lot over a small period of time. Those subjects will gradually fall out of the public eye or out of, relevance, and then they'll be replaced by another one. So currently, what's going on right now is the issue of student protests and how universities facilitate/allow student protests. Around this time last year, the same thing was happening, but for the issue of sexual misconduct on campus and in student colleges. So, and I bring this up not to say that either of these issues aren't worth talking about. I really do believe that both of these issues are very important to talk about. But here's where we get into a little bit of an issue in terms of how the news covers topics. Sorry, how the news covers topics. So, you would have noticed that news tends to happen in cycles, right? A lot of you will be familiar with the term news agenda. And in my first video, I talked about the two tools that news organizations use to create this agenda. The first one being framing, which is basically when they take some issues or some parts of a situation and emphasize that at the cost of either neglecting or, at worst, obscuring other aspects of what's going on or other issues that are going on. And the second one being agenda setting, which is an organized use of framing to set society's agenda in terms of what problems are most important to address first. Now, again, a lot of you will be familiar with this idea. This is nothing new to you guys. If you watch the news, you know that news has an agenda. Hopefully these words have given you more terminology to describe it, but the fact remains the same. What you might not be aware of, though, is that this agenda is actually determined based on a set of principles, news values that get taught to us, taught to all journalists when they're doing their media degrees. And these news values are as follows. You have impact, timeliness, prominence, proximity, unusualness, conflict and controversy, human interest, and cultural currency. Now, I'll be explaining what some of these are a little bit more in a second, but this is a pretty large list, reasonably large at least. This is like 8 total different values, right? And usually when it comes to determining, like, whether a story satisfies the condition of possessing news values, a story will possess multiple of them. However, and again, this is something that all of you get, that everyone who does a media degree gets taught. But if you don't have a media degree, and if you're just watching the news, you could be forgiven for thinking that the list of news values actually looks a bit more like this. So this is part of a larger trend that's been happening in journalism since, I would say, the advent of the internet. Already, these issues tended to get a little bit more representation when it comes to the kinds of articles that would be written, because these kinds of news values and the stories that they create tend to get the most attention if all you read is the headline. However, when the internet became a thing, these skyrocketed in terms of viability compared to the others. And it's part of the reason why we have this problem with, headline reading being such a common method of comprehension and interpretation in the way that we just operate on social media. And especially because news nowadays is published in a way that integrates social media and has to play by the rules of social media platforms. These are the news values that have kind of overshadowed all of the rest. So, cultural currency sounds very sussy. Oh, believe you me, we are going to get to that one in a second. So, in terms of what each of these news values are, I'll give you an example. So, timeliness, pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just how recent something has happened. However, the problem is, in the pursuit of timeliness, every news organization has done this at least once. But when you're pursuing timeliness, you open yourself up to the risk of making mistakes when you're trying to get to a story first. Now, this was a news story that was published originally by 7 News in Australia. So a few weeks ago in Bondi, we had a mass stabbing occur. And 7 News, in its rush to satisfy this news value, in a rush to get the story out first, got the wrong guy. They named a guy called Benjamin Cohen as the perpetrator of the stabbings. So, as a result, thankfully, he's been given a defamation settlement with 7 for an undisclosed amount of money. But again, every news organization has committed this kind of misinformation or defamation at least once. And more often than not, I would say, it's because they're trying to pursue timeliness. Is that the reason why drama channels are criticized? Yeah, that could also be part of it. Because again, when you're a drama channel, you need to get to things quickly. And the problem with journalism is that the overwhelming bulk of journalism has basically morphed into being the exact same thing as drama channels. The next value is prominence. Now, prominence basically means that your story revolves around or involves a prominent figure and or event. And this is funny because Moist Critical actually like talked about this in a video not too long ago, where he was mocking the fact that Dexterto seems to pay its journalist using his face. But in case you're wondering why you'll get these random news articles that headline or, use the picture of a prominent like celebrity or internet figure when the topic at hand doesn't really need to have anything to do with them, this is why they do it, because this is a news value in and of itself, right? Think of it as like sort of it's the equivalent of the way that some content creators will clout chase by like trying their best to make all of their content revolve around a larger creator, but like the traditional news media organization version of that. So in case you're wondering why you have so many Dexerto articles about Moist Critical, so many Sports Skeeter articles about Asmongold, or so many news articles in general about Taylor Swift, this is why. The next value, conflict and controversy. Now, this has been like a selling point of news for eternity, as long as news has existed, even predating things like newspapers, news channels. This has been, again, one of the most prominent news values in the reporting of news. However, two things that modern iterations of news reporting have kind of done with this particular news value. One is that in their pursuit of conflict and controversy as a news value, a lot of news organizations, their news agendas tend to default to reporting on conflicts that have a very clear binary, whether it's a moral binary or whether it's simply just two clear forces in opposition to one another. These tend to be the stories that get talked about the most, and these tend to be the way that things are being framed. So, for example, a lot of the university articles that I showed earlier on were very clear-cut examples of one side versus the other side. In this case, when you're talking about like student protests, it's a very clear example of student versus university, student versus institution. When it came to the sexual misconduct thing, it was the same sort of thing, right? Student versus institution, with a little sprinkling in of men versus women. But again, because of the fact that moral binaries tend to be favored more often as a result of this, because again, you don't just want conflict and controversy. You want conflict and controversy that can be digested, condensed down to a single headline and understood by most people at a single glance, right? As a result of that, inadvertently, it has sort of made complexity and any sort of depth to that argument impossible. On top of that, it's also meant that any conflicts that occur that have sort of murky, if there's an issue that occurs that's like complex, that's not just a clear case of us versus them or one side versus another, if it's like a systemic problem, it tends to get a good deal less coverage because it's simply just too much to get across. The other thing is that because this is such a prominent news value nowadays, we've fallen into the trap of journalists kind of trying to create controversies and conflicts out of nothing. And we saw this with the Assassin's Creed thing, where and I've covered this before, but essentially, there is a way that you can talk about an issue that makes the issue worse. And journalists ultimately get a choice in what kind of opinions they platform using their news articles. A lot of the time, the opinions that journalists will present as being like in the wrong or being the instigator of a conflict or controversy are relatively obscure. And the problem is, though, because they want to show off a conflict or controversy happening, they end up spotlighting those opinions over more neutral takes. So all of this kind of boils down to like a fundamental like ethical problem where a lot of journalism ethics, right, can be boiled down to a single principle, And that is that as a journalist, you do not get to make the things that you are reporting on happen, right? Obvious conflict of interest there. So what that means is if you want to report on a controversy, you should not be the one creating that controversy. You should not be the one instigating that controversy. You should only be reporting on how it emerged. The problem is, this kind of journalism strays dangerously close to instigating that controversy entirely on its own. And this ties into the next news value, which is cultural currency. Now, cultural currency basically means that an article is somewhat relevant to the existing cultural concerns at the time that it is being published. So, here's the problem. If you've ever wondered why news organizations tend to feed so much into like culture war stuff, like, your standard left versus right, black versus white, man versus woman, non-binary versus like everyone else. The reason why they do that is because it actually makes their life easier. Because if you exist in an environment where there is an ongoing culture war, all of your stories have cultural currency, or you can give all of your stories cultural currency really easily because you could just frame it through the lens of one of those existing conflicts. And we saw this with the gamer just coming in clutch with a brilliant example of why I hate journalism. But Resident Evil 5 is too racist for a remake. This is like the poster child of idiotic ways of reporting on an issue, or even just making an issue out of nothing. And again, the reason why they pursue this is because this feeds into an existing, cultural conflict that is currently going on, which is the issue of, anti-black racism. If you read through the article, it spends a lot of time talking about how, and this is me, condensing it by quite a lot. It spends a lot of time talking about how the game is supposedly racist because all the zombies are black and you're shooting all of these zombies, even though the game is set in Africa. So it kind of makes sense that, the zombies are black. So another example that I want to briefly touch on is an example that Friendly Geordies recently brought up in a video, which was an article that was written in Crikey about how Australia is doing its best to build up its manufacturing industry, or our current government is trying its best to build up our manufacturing industry. And the way that this article was framed was that it framed it as this sort of jobs for the blokes, this sort of feeding into the narrative of men getting privileged over women when it comes to the government's attention in building up an industry. Now, this is a move by the government to address what is a pretty complex problem. So when you think of Australia, right, I want you to think of Australia as the OnlyFans model of first world countries. And what I mean by that is that our economy, a good chunk of our economic well-being, is completely reliant on having an audience that finds us interesting. So a lot of our economy is, floated up on the backs of trading our resources with, let's say, China, or our land to America, Alice Springs. So yeah, again, as a result of that, Australia doesn't really have, at the moment, a really strong manufacturing industry of its own. Our wealth comes in large part from just exporting our shit. So obviously, at some point in the future, that might become a problem. It would be helpful if we could make our own shit. But again, like I said, this is a very complex problem that has nuance to it. Nuance that modern journalism seems to be allergic to. Hence this way of portraying said issue, right? And again, I really want to emphasize, if you find it weird that news articles are tying things that seem to be like have no relation to an existing culture war, and you're wondering why, this is why. So you're not crazy, it's actually happening, and there is a word for it. Australia has a Hawaii problem. Yeah, pretty much. All right, so journalism right now is kind of dead, right? Where, say, except for investigative journalism, all the other forms of journalism are slowly being like rotted from the inside out because of that kind of way of, portraying the news. And investigative journalism is like a dying trade, anyways, because at some point, if you're a successful investigative journalist, you'll either be forced between choosing to get a number or become a statistic. But the reason why this is such a problem is because even though journalism is a very flawed way of communicating things to the public, it's an essential part of raising public awareness about a certain issue. And when you have an environment where journalism is done in a way that is allergic to complexity, allergic to nuance, other issues that have a level of complexity, nuance, that don't have a clear two sides to a problem or conflict, they kind of fall by the wayside. And I say this because there is a problem that's been silently boiling away in the background for at least the last decade. And that is the issue of medical professionals, medical students, having deteriorating mental health. Now, unfortunately, whenever the news tends to discuss the topic of medical professionals suffering from deteriorating mental health for some reason or other, this news tends to crop up in trends that occur around the same time that one of these professionals ends up taking their own life. And that tends to be the only thing that galvanizes the same sort of concentrated media attention that we saw with those other issues, like student protests or misconduct on campus. All the other coverage around medical students is a good deal. It's like pretty similar, right? You'll have maybe like one medical student that ends up taking their life, and as a result, for like 1 or 2 weeks, you'll get news articles written about how, there's a mental health crisis going on in medicine, and then suddenly it'll all like fall off. And you do have sporadic coverage occurring like throughout, but a lot of this coverage doesn't really touch on the mental health aspect that much, or at least that's not the main focus of the article, right? Because it's a lot of our recent articles have been focusing on things like financial troubles, although that's been a big talking point in Australia in general, because we're currently going through a cost of living crisis, which is one of the buzzwords that's been tossed around. But, we're kind of getting fucked by rising rent prices, really bad city planning, a duopoly in terms of our grocery chains. So it's pretty rough financially. But again, when it comes to the issue of mental health, it's really underreported. And this is both an important and a difficult problem to address for 2 reasons. One is, unless it's anonymous, medical students especially will strongly resist self-reporting, right? And part of this is due to, at least from what I've heard and what other studies have confirmed as well, an enduring stigma that if you are diagnosed with some sort of mental health condition, that might, in some way, impact your future careers. Now, I know that this is an actual thing because I've had, and again, this is where the sort of anecdotal side of things comes into play. I've had medical students who have come up to me and told me that when they suspected that they might have, let's say, anxiety, depression, ADHD, and they've gone in to see a psychiatrist, that consultation ended with the psychiatrist saying, yes, I think you do have this condition, but I don't think you should be diagnosed because if you do, that might affect your career prospects. And again, this is a medical professional telling someone that, right? So if this is like and again, this is not something that people will declare publicly, but the fact that it exists means that this stigma does not exist for no reason. It has a source. The second problem is that, partially as a result of the stuff that I talked about with stigma and stuff, medical students just don't feel like they're in an environment where anyone is obligated to give a shit about them. And they don't feel like they're in an environment that can support them through that kind of struggle. So that is awful to tell someone. Yeah, that's true. But as a result of this, right, because of the fact that there is, because of the fact that there exist environmental systemic problems with the way that medicine works as an industry and as, like, as a discipline of study, which we will talk about later on in the stream. Because of all of those things, right, it's a terrible thing to tell someone, but it might actually be justifiable, because there is a real chance that there might actually be discrimination against, people who have been formally diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and nobody will know. Because, in part, there is a massive problem with a lack of transparency in the way that student to mentor, or how do I put this? Student to mentor communication is done when a student is put in the position of like an internship. So, as a result of all these problems that I talked about earlier, right? I want to stress that even though a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is like anecdotal evidence from like stuff that people have said when they approached me about this issue, there have been studies, like academic studies, that have been done about this problem, right? But because of all the issues that I just talked about, these studies tend to suffer from these three problems, right? They tend to be relatively small in scale, and data tends to be sparse. A lot of it also relies on anonymously reported data, because again, these students do not want to out themselves. They do not feel safe, they do not feel supported, and they feel like they would be punished with no possibility of recourse. So, as a result of both of these things, evaluating solutions is also extraordinarily difficult. So we have had instances where universities have like launched an initiative to give some sort of like mental health support training to their students, or like, something that our university implemented a while ago was Are You Okay Day, which is like impotent at best and performative at worst. So like like, honestly, what is that supposed to do for somebody? But yeah, so evaluating solutions is really difficult, because even if you implement something that you think will be effective, right, that isn't just, asking someone if they're okay. If a medical student tries out one of your solutions, one of your, support systems, countermeasures, whatever, and it doesn't work, they aren't going to say anything. They aren't going to leave a review. They aren't going to give feedback. They're just going to stop using it. And the problem then endures. So what you kind of get is this sort of feedback system where if it works for people, they'll tell you about it. But if it doesn't work for people, the people who it doesn't work for will keep silent. So again, it's really difficult to evaluate how effective the measures you're putting in place are for solving this particular issue. My university told me that my ADHD doesn't matter at all, and I just wanted to scream. Okay, yeah. So we have that kind of intolerance as well, which is a massive problem. And it's especially a problem in medicine for reasons that we'll get into later. But yeah, even though a lot of universities have this sort of we care about mental health kind of rhetoric, you see plenty of cracks in that particular sort of representation of themselves. I'm doing a degree in psych, and honestly, it's like they give the whole "we can care for your mental health" as lip service. It's kind of ironic, because out of all of the students that I've spoken to over the course of my degree, by far it is medical and psych students that do the worst mental health wise, and they're the ones who get the most sort of mental health support awareness training as well as a part of their degree. So I mentioned before that there were studies that have been done. A lot of these studies date from around 2019. This was a study that was done by Beyond Blue, which is a mental health association that exists in Australia. And this was basically a study that was first done in 2013, updated in 2019, that tried to touch base in terms of how well doctors and medical students were doing in terms of their mental health. this was also like a similar study that was done using data that partially came from this, I believe, that tried to like, just sum up how medical students seem to be doing in general between Australia and New Zealand. One of the stats that this study found that I think is particularly concerning is this. So they, as part of their study, they wanted to get an idea of the proportion of medical students that had experienced suicidal ideation within the last 12 months of being part of this study. The percentage was 20% for females, 17% for males. Then they took the statistic, did the same sort of thing by measuring what proportion of the general population had this same issue. And as you can see, the numbers are way lower. 2.7% for women, 1.9% for men. These numbers are almost 10 times the size of this. And they repeated the same thing when it comes to depression and anxiety. And they found the exact same trend over there, where medical students were just, disproportionately more likely to suffer from those conditions than, as compared to the general population. Spencer Howard, I prefer outward prejudice than performative BS. Same, because at least you can address, outward prejudice easier. So yeah. And I do want to just emphasize, right? Like, this is an issue. Hands down, this is an issue, right? No one's going to argue with that. But in case you might be thinking, oh, well, the data for this might be taken from a sample size that's too small or misleading in some way because of its size, I think that it's pretty reasonable, because of all the things that I talked about before, I think it's pretty reasonable to assume that this statistic is more likely to be an underrepresentation than an overrepresentation. And again, even though this is a study that's been done in Australia, this is not a problem that's unique to Australia. So in 2021, like 2020, 2019, throughout all those years, you have universities that have tried to take all of these localized studies that have been done on a per nation basis and have tried to pool them all together into a single meta study to try and see if this is a trend that is going on worldwide. And surprise, surprise, it is. This is a paper that basically confirms the idea that anxiety is grossly overrepresented in medical students in terms of the percentage of them that suffer from it compared to the general population, and that this is a trend that's happening throughout all parts of the world. Again, because of the way that each particular country has its own set of specifics in terms of student circumstances, subject culture, etc., etc. The exact percentages tend to vary wildly. I think the final percentage they settled on was for reported anxiety, when they averaged out all the different studies, was something like 1 to 65%, which is a massive range to the point where it almost loses meaning. But again, the main point being that across the world, this is a condition that is overrepresented in medical students. Now, this was a paper that basically, again, reiterated that same point, but included depression in the statistics as well. And they also included a section where they basically said, this is an important problem to address because it is, well, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but they proved it using numbers anyways, that medical students that suffer from depression, anxiety, that feel unsupported in their studies, they go on to become doctors that are less effective because, essentially, they're burnt out. They're going into a career that is extraordinarily demanding on mentally, physically, emotionally, and they're going in on empty tanks. So there is one more study that I wanted to touch on, and that is a study that was done in 2020 where they interviewed a bunch of medical students to get an idea of what these students felt what these students felt were the main stresses that caused them to have deteriorating mental health. And a lot of the things that were mentioned in these interviews were the things that I talked about just then. Stuff like feeling unsupported by the system that, you were educated in, feeling like academic staff wasn't there to support you, and in worse cases were, actually there as a punitive force, like, something there to ensure only there to like discipline you, or like, tell you off or something. They also described that they didn't feel like their peers were enough of a supportive network for them, which, to be fair, I kind of understand, because if everyone's burnt out, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that they can just rely on one another to get through it. And finally, the thing is that, again, you had that exact same trend where some of these universities that these students who were interviewed came from had implemented, like, mental health awareness programs. Some of them instituted like mental health breaks or mental health holidays in the middle of the semester, or leave that you could take whenever you felt like things were getting especially bad. And now some of these students who were interviewed did feel like that was a very effective way of treating their problems. But for the others who didn't feel like this was enough, or felt like they were implemented in a way that was designed to discourage students from actually using those support systems, they just didn't say anything. They only spoke up in the study because it was anonymous. And they, again, for all the reasons I just mentioned, they didn't feel like this was something that they could voice out when it was attached to their identity. So, to set up, I'm going to give you a specific case study of this happening in Australia, right? An example of students being unsupported when placed in a program that very obviously doesn't seem to be designed for their well-being in mind. But to understand how this case study works, I'm going to have to explain like a little bit of like specific terminology. HECS and CSPs. HECS in Australia is basically the government's way of paying your university fees for you. And, what happens is these university fees get put into the form of a low interest loan that you only have to start paying back once you break through a certain tax bracket. Scarling, maybe people who experience those health issues tend to get into studying them and working on them for others because they are more aware of the weight of their symptoms that come, and as a result, nobody does the same for them. Yeah, a large part of this issue all consists of essentially just medical students being expected to be the future backbone of our healthcare system while having precious few ways of looking after their mental health. So yeah, the second term that I want to introduce to you guys is CSPs, Commonwealth Supported Place. This is basically the position in your course, in your university, that is paid for by the government. Now, something really important that I want you to keep in the back of your mind is not all CSPs are made equal. Some CSPs will come with additional terms, conditions, and obligations that other CSPs don't have. I want you to put a pin in that because we're going to be coming back to that later on in the stream. The second thing that you're going to need to understand is a little bit about Australian geography. It's really short, so don't worry. Essentially, a lot of Australia is only good to live on if it's like around the coastline. We don't care about this section. Since Tasmanian tigers died out, this has been pretty mid, to say the least. But yeah, a lot of our cities, a lot of our infrastructure is concentrated around the coastline of Australia. And part of the reason for that is the more you move inland, the more this region is like, just a desert, right? But also, because of the fact that a lot of our infrastructure and stuff is concentrated around the coastline, the more you move into rural areas, the less infrastructure is proportionally divided amongst the communities. As a result of that, Australia is facing a bit of a problem with the way that healthcare is done in rural areas, because what tends to happen is that either healthcare facilities aren't located close enough to rural communities, or the healthcare facilities that exist in a rural community are under strain because they don't have enough staff to look after that particular community, right? And this maps without New Zealand. Look, as much as we like to pretend that New Zealand is part of Australia, it's really not. So this is like New Zealand light. But anyways, so as a way of addressing this particular problem, right? The government has implemented a bunch of medical school programs where basically medical students would be sent out to do their internships or placements clinical training in a rural healthcare facility, right? So again, they would be sent out to like a clinic or a hospital, and they would basically act as extra hands-on staff to help out with the doctors, the nurses, the whatever that were already working there. And in doing so, they would also get the experience that they needed to graduate. So all of this has culminated in something called the Rural Health Multidisciplinary Training Program. This is a publicly accessible webpage. All of the documents that I've gotten that I will show you in a few seconds is publicly available and obtainable as a result of clicking on various links on this webpage. But essentially what this is a series of grants that are opened in rounds to a bunch of universities where, again, universities can apply for these grants that sometimes number above like $3 million. They can obtain these grants as a way of further developing their own university-specific rural health, rural training programs. So essentially, they get this grant, and then they're supposed to put the money towards, like, you know, funding the hospital, building student accommodation, like paying staff to supervise this program, right? I can see no way this goes catastrophically. Oh, if only you knew. And you will in a few moments. So yeah, RHMT, right? Now, at the bottom of this webpage, if you click on it, it will take you to a website called Grant Connect, which basically lists the documents that get updated year to year that tell you how this particular program is run. This document will contain things like, for example, specifying what you should include in your application if you're a university applying for a grant, or what the money can be used for. Now, this situation was first brought to my attention around this time, like last year. So I've included the 2023 version of the document that was made available, and the 2024 version that is currently available. We're going to be looking at both, but we're going to start with 2023. There are a few things about this document that I really want to dig into. So, first thing, it's always a good thing when you look at something that's supposed to be like a welfare or well-being initiative and that you see it has KPIs, right? Now, usually, I mean, like, you know, if you're a government, you're spending millions of dollars on something, you probably want to be able to keep track of how well something's working, right? So, again, KPIs on their own, not a bad thing. But the reason why I tend to be suspicious when I see it in this kind of document is because how well it works, or how well it's measured in terms of, like, you know, how you evaluate its effectiveness, that is entirely dependent on what they choose to keep track of as part of the KPIs. Because once you name your KPIs, it becomes more about satisfying those KPIs than perhaps working towards the goal that is, you know, it tends to be a case of you stop working towards the goal that's behind the program and you start working towards just satisfying the KPIs, right? So what are these KPIs? At the end of the document, they list out some of them in a section called Core Requirements. Now, there is one specific part of Core Requirements that I want to really emphasize when it comes to the 2023 version of this document. It is acknowledged that while one of the program goals is to maximize rural expenditure, the university may need to spend a small proportion of funds related to the program activity at its main metropolitan campus. How much of the budget can they spend? 5%. Now, 5%, not a lot, but 5% of like $3 million is quite a bit. And again, that's a lot of money to be spending on something that isn't a rural placement program or rural facility. So again, this is a little suspicious, right? And then the second thing is, one of the KPIs that they explicitly bring up is that they expect a number of medical students, like, you know, equivalent to 25% of the university's CSP allocation. They have to undertake at least 1 year of their clinical training in a rural area. Right? So essentially, 25% of all the CSPs in a university's medical degree, in order for the university to continue qualifying for this grant, they need to have at least 25% of those students do at least 1 year of training in a rural placement facility. And again, this isn't like a hard rule. I want to emphasize that this document, when it was made available, and, you know, to this day, when these documents are made available, they are always made available in the form of a draft, right? It's not guaranteed that this is going to be the final version of them. Spencer, if you don't mind me asking, what state are you in? I am currently in New South Wales. So, yeah, with rural medical training, right? This is not like a hard and fast rule, but it is something that they are encouraged, the universities participating in this grant program are encouraged to hit. So, usually, this ratio isn't a problem. This quota isn't a problem. Because, like I said before, these are students that are going to facilities that are understaffed. But what that also means is that each of these students gets more individual attention from the professionals who are already working there. So, in many ways, this is actually a more beneficial experience, education-wise, than it is a detrimental one. Now, from the most of the students that I've talked about who have gone on rural placements, right, have been pretty happy with their experience. And although one thing I do want you to bear in mind is that the students who end up saying this are students that only go on placements for like a month, right? For them, it's like a fun trip that also happens to give them training that is integral to their degree. But the thing that I want to pose to you, the question that I want to ask you guys is, what do you think happens when a university has an RHMT program running, but for some reason or other doesn't have enough students signing up to join the program? And actually, I might wait a few minutes to see what you guys might be saying. But yeah, how's New South Wales after Bruz left? It seems to be like it's getting better. Like it's like slightly better. It's hard. It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, I have been seeing anecdotally, I have been seeing an uptick in roadwork in my like particular neighborhood. So I would assume that that's a good thing. Oh no, I know where this is going. All right, yeah, I'm not going to bother with the suspense thing. So yeah, look, if you would have guessed that the university resorts to a Hunger Games style selection process where they randomly pick students to join the program as a way of filling up their quota, then you'd be correct, because this actually happened at one of the universities of someone I know who does medicine. Some people I know who do medicine. So, essentially, for I think a few years now, like one or two, I'm not very certain, but for more than a year now, this university, and I'm going to keep them anonymous for obvious reasons, this university was running this program and they didn't have enough students signing up. So their way of getting around this was randomly emailing students, telling them, you are now going on this placement. And I want you to remember that because of the quota, the key performance indicator they need to satisfy, these students aren't going to be going there for a month. They will be going there for at least a year. Some of the students that I've spoken to have told me that the university has been thinking about increasing it to 2 years, presumably as a way of making up for the lack of students signing up. So even though they can still meet that key performance indicator. So, bro, what the hell? My thoughts exactly. That was like word for word my reaction when I first heard about this. So, now it is worth noting that these random allocations aren't entirely random, because they are allocated with special circumstances in mind, right? So essentially, if you tick off a certain special circumstance, they either won't allocate a place to you in the first place, or if you suddenly get, allocated one and you satisfy one of these special circumstances, you can apply to be let off the hook, right? You can apply to be, dropped so they can presumably randomly allocate a placement to somebody else. The problem arises, though, when you actually take a look at what these special circumstances are. So this is a document that I got shown. Obviously, the screenshot quality is like really bad. So, don't worry. I just included this to show that I actually do have some form of receipts, right? I have a higher quality version, which is like a screenshot from an iPhone. So, think of this as like a special considerations list where you can lodge an application saying, I have these things going on in my life, so just don't select me, right? And the thing about this special considerations list is once you read through it, it's a lot more special than it is considerate. So, the reasons they will accept for, like, special circumstances are major health problems requiring frequent and ongoing specialized treatment, which is only available in certain locations. Think cancer. Because, yeah, this cancer, right? Being a parent of a dependent child or children. I mean, very obviously, you don't want to randomly send someone away when they're like a single parent or something. Involvement in sport or music at an elite level, competing in a national and international level. So again, you don't want to interrupt, an athlete's career or anything that might give you clout that you could use to advertise your university. And being a registered carer for a sick relative. Again, pretty understandable reason for not wanting to go on placement, right? There's no one left to look after whoever you're caring for if you end up leaving, so you stay. This is almost comical how stupid it is. I use 4chan, exclude me please. Yeah, pretty much. This makes me so mad. Yeah, I've been fuming about this for like a fucking year. So, yeah. However, again, some of these reasons, fair enough, right? However, the real doozy is when you look at the reasons that they don't accept in terms of special considerations. Now, previous allocations, including missing... actually, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to read through this list and see if you spot anything that looks a little weird. Can I get a gambling addiction to avoid this? Oh, you can't, and you'll see why if you read through this list. So you can only escape if you are dying. Yeah, pretty much. I'll see. I'm going to keep an eye on chat for a little bit to see if you guys spot some of the various things that are very wrong with this list. Pack up, Jimmy. You're going to us Aussie Nam. Okay, I do want to stress that like these rural areas are not like hellscapes, right? They're not awful places to be. The only thing that I have issue with is the fact that these are being allocated to people, one, randomly, and two, in a way that threatens to severely disrupt their lives if they're not ready for it. Huh? Yeah. Okay, so they've listed lack of access to a motor vehicle or inability to drive, other transportation issues including time or costs, relationships without dependence, religious grounds, I don't know why they included that one, ownership or rental of accommodation or other accommodation issues. So again, if you have a lease that will be that extends to when you are supposed to go on placement, too bad. That doesn't matter. And financial issues. What the fuck do you mean financial issues is not a circumstance that you'll accept? Hello? Are you ill? What? Why? Like, these are university students. Statistically speaking, the poorest you can get without being actually in poverty, and some of them are actually in poverty, I am convinced. So, what? And also, employment or other extracurricular activities. So if you have a job that requires you to stay where you are, too bad, not anymore. And the last one is unable to access your, basically the student website due to non-payment of student fees. The fact that they have financial issues and this listed on the same, on the same part of this document is fucking hilarious. Because it's like, oh, are you too poor to access the student website so you can decline this placement? Too bad. Guess you're going. Oh, also, we don't give a fuck if you have financial issues. Huh? This is someone high up in the university, presumably, has seen this list and gone, yep, that looks good. Let's ship this off to the students. This'll be fine. Hello? I'm a politician, am I excluded? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, what the hell is other under accommodation issues? You see, I could only assume that they included that as a catch-all term to bat down applications if they had some sort of rent problem or lease problem or whatever. But holy shit, this is so bad. So okay, I want to be really fair, right? When they say special circumstances, maybe they mean special circumstances in the sense that these are the situations that they don't take into consideration when they're allocating the placement, but they will take into consideration if you put it in an application form. But I want to emphasize that the students that told me about this, they did not get the impression that that was how things were working. So at the very least, that is a very severe miscommunication on the university's part. And if you publish a list like this, do you really expect your students to believe that you have their best interests at heart? Like, just the ownership or rental of accommodation and financial issues on its own are bad enough. But when you combine it with other stuff like this, and like religious grounds, which is more of a meme than anything else, it really comes across as you just don't give a shit about your students. So, the best part is, this isn't even free. If you get sent on this placement, you still have to pay a nominal fee to live there. Now, granted, the accommodation is only like $90 per week, which in terms of like, rent prices in Australia is actually pretty fucking good. But again, I want to reiterate that even if it's low, that doesn't fucking matter. Because the people who are being sent on this, who are being randomly selected, might not have a choice in whether they end up going, which means they might not have a choice in paying for this. So again, $2,610 if you pay early, and $2,970 if you pay monthly. So yeah, this is kind of like, this is just very very much miscommunication. Yep, this is very rich. So again, like, you still have to pay for accommodation. You might not have a choice in going. But for a second, let's take a moment and see what they actually offer as part of these accommodation facilities, shall we? Because I got sent their university handbook. And in terms of what is provided, internet free of charge, fully furnished house or apartment, equipped with basic kitchen equipment, ironing board, and flat screen television, air conditioned, heated, lockable bedroom with desk, bookshelf, bedside table with drawers, built-in wardrobe, and under bed storage, lockable storage pantry, and laundry cupboards, and nothing else. In terms of what you need to bring, you have a whole bunch of personal stuff to do with, like, bedding, toiletries, hygiene products. You need to bring clothes hangers and a desk lamp, as well as your own clock. And in terms of things that the household in general is going to require, you need your own kitchen utensils, your own knives, your own detergent/sponges, your own cooking equipment. Like, what the fuck? Like, hello? I just said, like, right at the beginning of this stream, I pointed out how Australia was in the middle of, like, a cost of living crisis. And holy shit, is it bad? Because, again, they don't pay for anything besides this, and you have to bring all of this stuff yourself. For reference, so essentially all their funding is the house that you are sleeping in, the water you get to drink, and the air you get to breathe. For reference, the bottom rung of Maslow's hierarchy of needs has 6 items, and they've basically ticked off like 3 of them. Or like 4 if you include sleep. You still have to bring everything else yourself. Your own, you still have to pay for your own groceries, first off. You still have to pay for your own clothing. Or bring your own clothing. Now, presumably, right? University poorness, yeah. No electric kettle. Yeah, that's right. So you're going to have to boil your own water and bring your own thing to boil it in. So, again, I want to really stress, a good deal of your living costs is going to come out of your own pocket, even while you're there, right? And especially if you don't take employment or something like that into account, I feel like it's not that unreasonable to say that that is an unreasonable expectation. Now, if you are having your university degree funded by the government, there is a decent chance that you are on like a government welfare scheme, like you are on what we have here is like a youth allowance or like a Centrelink, right? Which is basically a government agency that pays you money if you're a university student, so if you're an Australian citizen, that gives you like, money to live off of. And again, in fairness, it's probably enough to pay for your grocery bills and stuff, maybe even petrol, if you're on placement and you don't have to worry about having your other sources of employment cut off. However, again, I do want to reiterate, this is a placement that some people might not have a choice in, and it's a placement that's going to last like a year, not a month, a year. So, oh yeah, this was something else. So, I went onto the university's website because I wanted to get a look at, what their mental health policies about, like, student well-being were, and whether this kind of program in any way conflicts with that. And when I tried clicking on this link to the Australian University Mental Health Framework, when I tried to click on that link, I got a fucking 404 error. You can't make this shit up. Oh. And the best part is, I went back, right, and I tried to click on the other links as well. I clicked contact us, and it did the same thing, where it brought me to a fucking 404 page. Now, to be fair, when I clicked on well-being and mental health strategy, that link did work. And as of this stream, right, I checked yesterday night as I was preparing for this stream. I checked, all 3 links are now working. So thankfully, someone noticed and they fixed the web page. But the irony of this at the time that I was finding out about the whole situation was just it was almost scripted, right? So yeah. Tax dollars well spent. Health not found? Exactly. So yeah, I thought that was funny. Okay, so in the case of this particular story, it does have a little bit of a happy ending. Now, the new iteration of this document, okay, the official sensitive in red at the top might not look good, but I promise this is a publicly available document, right? So the 2024 iteration has quite a few differences from the 2023 iteration. And the 2023 iteration was like a document that was made in, I think, like 2017 or something. So it was really old. But the newer iteration has a few differences from the old version. First, in terms of the KPIs, they've updated it so that there's no longer like a 1-year requirement. Now they just want 100% of the CSP allocation to enroll in a rural medical school program, which is, again, pretty reasonable, because usually this means that you have, I know that UNSW is doing this, where their medical students in, I think they're like 5th year or something, are all of them have to go on a rural placement, but that placement is only for like a month. And again, a lot of the reviews that I've heard from the students who have gone on this medical placement program have been great, right? They've had a great time. They've seen how it's useful to their degree, how it helps them prepare for their medical careers. And again, it's just a month, so it's not that intrusive on their life outside of their degree. The second difference is that they've gotten rid of the 5% thing in the previous agreement, where now the money cannot be used for any activities conducted in metropolitan areas. So that was something that I felt was pretty weird about the previous one, that has now been like a loophole, if you will, that has now been sort of shut, right? So thank goodness. Yeah, that's exactly how I felt reading this. So thankfully, they've changed and grown as a person. So I don't know how that particular university is doing. I don't know if they've changed their rural placement program to match this specific thing. But again, it's only for this year. I haven't really checked in with the people who told me about this. So maybe they have. But I'm hopeful that the situation has improved if it's reflected in the documentation that dictates how these grants are given and how these grants should be used. However, it's not over yet, because there's something else going on in medicine where the government itself is proving to be a little bit of an antagonistic force in terms of how these medical students are doing. I want to introduce you to the bonded medical program. Basically, what this is a way, the government's way of opening up extra spots in quotation marks, in medicine, where in exchange for being given a place in a medical, in a medicine course, you are obligated to, at the end of your degree, give 3 years of service in a rural health facility or in a rural area, right? Now, on the surface, pretty reasonable, right? You get access to a degree that a lot of people want that's really competitive, right? A degree that maybe if you didn't use this program, you barely just missed out on. And you get to be a doctor. And the only condition is after you've graduated, you just have to do 3 years in a rural area. And mind you, this isn't like an internship or anything, or necessarily an internship or anything. You can be getting paid for your services, and it's perfectly fine. The only condition is that you do 3 years, right? The only problem is that okay, so yeah, before I get to like the main problems with this, I want you to bear in mind, right? In the back of your mind, the goal of this is to make it so that we have more doctors, more medical professionals in rural areas, right? That is the ultimate goal of this program. So, I got sent a link to a Senate hearing where they were evaluating the effectiveness of this program in advancing that particular goal, getting medical professionals to move to rural areas, right? And again, this Senate hearing is pretty old, 2017 to 2018. So this program has been a thing for I think around 7 to 8 years. But this was a Senate hearing early on that was trying to judge how effective it was. And there are two things in this hearing that are a little concerning. One is when the Senate was asked, of those who have completed their service, how many remain in rural and remote communities? The answer was the department does not monitor the status of individual BMP scheme participants once they have exited the scheme, which means that after these professionals have done their 3 years of service, they don't bother to keep track of how many of them still stay in that rural area. So, again, look, the primary goal is to get more people to train in rural areas, which arguably they are achieving. But if their secondary goal is to make more, professionals stay in those areas, they have no way of measuring how well that is going. And even worse, of the bonded medical students that have completed their education but not yet commenced their return of service, how many have gone overseas? And they get the same answer. The department does not have any data available for the number of medical students that have completed their education and gone overseas before commencing their return of service. Yeah, so yeah, it's Sumanai. The fuck is the point? That's what I was saying. So you could theoretically become a part of this bonded medical program, complete your degree, and then fuck off to another country, and they have no way of keeping track of that. So already their metric in terms of evaluating the effectiveness is a little dubious, to say the least. But, okay, so where do they get their surveys from? That's what I'm saying. No long-term doctor-patient relationships? Exactly, right? And, again, unless you want your long-term relationships to only be 3 years. So yeah. But there's another problem as well. And that is what happens if you end up pulling out of this degree or you end up failing to meet your return of service requirement. Now, what happens is that if you breach this agreement, because this is a contract that you have to sign, right? If you breach this agreement, you now have to pay the entirety of your student fees up to the point where you quit your degree in a loan to the government. And this is a loan that has an interest rate of 15% per annum. Now, remember that because it's a medical degree, these loans can go up to easily above 50K by the time you first do any degree of clinical training, right? Lol, yeah, they destroy you. Nothing to do with anything, but I love chess. Me too. So yeah, they have this clause in their contract, and this is how you're punished if you end up defaulting. Now, if you are a doctor that is freshly graduated and you have to pay this fee, sure, that's not great, but doctors get paid a high amount of money. So I think this, while it isn't optimal, it's survivable. The problem is, this is also, there is no distinction in this contract between doctors who fail to meet their return of service and students that just end up pulling out of the course. So, if you are a student and you withdraw from the course before, if you withdraw after the census date, which is basically when you're locked into the study period, the census date of your second year of study, you are in breach of your contract, which means that you are now saddled with this massive debt with a 15% interest, right? This is, when I first heard of this, I thought this was insane, because these are fucking uni students. These are medical students, right? Medical students are easily among the poorest people in university. So in terms of student population, right? So again, that's fucking insane. And just to give you an idea, right? They say that you, in order to avoid breaching your contract, you have to withdraw from your medical degree before the census date of your second year of study, right? However, you only start doing clinical placements in a medical degree around your fourth or fifth year of study. So essentially, if you, as a student, are unsure of whether you actually want to be a doctor or not in the future, you don't really get to make that choice as an informed decision. Because if you are a part of this program, you either have to pull out before you really get to experience what it's like to be a doctor or a nurse, or you pull out afterward, or you kind of lock yourself into having to complete your degree plus the 3 years of additional service all the way until the end, even if you do your placement and you find out you actually hate it, which is not an unreasonable thing to happen, right? Because again, like we've been talking about this entire stream, being a doctor is a really difficult job. You have to see the lowest and the worst of humanity on routinely, and you have to be superhuman in the fact that you need to be like a pillar of strength throughout the entirety of other people's suffering. So, it's very understandable if after doing your first placement and you realize all of this and you decide, yep, this isn't the career to me, you decide to pull out. The problem is, again, if you choose to pull out and you're a part of this program, you are now obligated to pay this massive debt. And the thing is, this isn't a case where the existing debt gets added on to this doesn't work like Hex, where you only need to pay it back once you breach a certain tax bracket, right? You need to pay it back within a certain time frame. And you want to know how long that time frame is? 28 days. You have 28 days as a student to pay back this debt that you accrued, which is the entirety of at least 2+ years of student fees. And again, this is just fucking insane to me. I could not comprehend what the fuck they were thinking in order to make this the case. And this is an email that I was forwarded from someone who had actually had this happen to them, right? So they forwarded me this email where they said, you have 28 days to pay this back to a fucking medical student. And again, I want to really emphasize, when I say that medical students are among the poorest students in universities, I mean it, right? The average student debt is around 200K by the time they graduate. So even if you only have half of that, let's say your average medical degree, or including training, is 7 to 10 years or something. I don't know, 7 years. Even half of that is 100K, and they're expecting you to pay that back as a student in 28 days. What the fuck? Are you ill? So I could not fucking believe it. But yeah, so this is actually something that happened to somebody who reached out to me. And they gave me a statement that, they gave me an anonymous statement that they've okayed me reading on stream as well. So, and this is what we're going to go through for a little bit. It's okay. So in the first sections, they're pretty much covering a lot of the information that we've already been talking about, right? So All right. I deferred my medical degree a few years ago due to complex personal reasons. However, I was a bonded medical student, which meant I was obligated to practice rurally for 3 years when I finished my degree, in return for the government paying their contribution to my university fees. What I didn't realize when I left was that, by leaving, I was actually breaching this agreement. In essence, this means that I now owe the government a substantial amount of money, far greater than the standard HEX debt. The reason that this system exists is to dissuade doctors from trying to get out of practicing rurally. Rural health is seriously lacking, which is why this program exists to send more doctors to rural hospitals. But what I now know was that it is also aimed at dissuading students. It is also aimed to dissuade students from leaving medicine. And again, I really want to emphasize that the whole, obviously, if you want your doctors to return their service, there needs to be some sort of incentive, right? So I get it when it applies to doctors who have already graduated and are actively practicing. Because mind you, this is a debt, the 3 years of service, this isn't something you have to do immediately after graduation. You have 18 years after the completion of your degree to do this return of service. It's only after those 18 years are over and you haven't done your service that this debt kicks in, right? So again, if you are a doctor, this is fine. It doesn't really affect you. But if you're a student, it affects you disproportionately. So, moving on. Naturally, this distressed me. Not only did I know that this would happen before I left medicine, but the department responsible for handling me was lacking greatly in clear communication. According to them, as soon as I officially left medicine, officially leaving meaning, dropped out rather than just deferring, I would owe all my debt within 28 days. They eventually agreed to allow me to pay the debt off over an extended period of time, but even now are yet to clarify what those terms may be. The implication being that they would only tell me once I actually drop out. So again, this guy's being kept in the dark about all of this, right? They're essentially saying, look, we'll give you a new payment plan, right? But only after you actually breach your contract. And when you have no other choice, you don't even have the option of going back and completing your medical degree. So already this is pretty scummy. Okay, for this, keep in mind that I have only technically deferred my degree, meaning that I haven't officially breached the agreement yet. However, I cannot return to medicine due to my circumstances. Furthermore, they have made it clear that these circumstances are not severe enough to allow me to be let off from our contract. I've spoken to this guy before about this, what his circumstances were. And to say the least, on top of the pandemic, which is what, which would be exceptional in any interpretation of the word. He was also this medical degree was fucking eating away at him, mentally, emotionally. So it's just kind of wild that doesn't seem to matter. But anyways, the implication here is simple. Don't leave medicine. Why would you leave medicine? There aren't a substantial number of students who leave medicine. Because why would you? There's an unsaid assertion that every medical student, every doctor, is beyond lucky to be where they are, and they must not waste what they have been so fortunately granted. This assertion greatly varies depending on person and age, but it's one I've certainly experienced, even amongst those who aren't in the medical field. When I tell people that I left medicine, they're always shocked. Why would you leave medicine? What were you thinking? Medicine is held on a pedestal by society, revered greatly, and that's fair. Doctors have a very difficult job, and there's no denying the sheer importance of what they do. But there's a difference between seeing a career as greatly important and unconditionally supporting it no matter the downsides that may come with it, because downsides exist with every career, and they mustn't be ignored even in medicine. I want to hug this person. Yeah, he's been going through a rough time. And this comes back to the whole law that exists to dissuade medical students from leaving medicine. The truth is, very few medical students would ever even leave medicine to begin with, because it's so hard to get in, and because every student feels greatly indebted to be there. Or, perhaps, is made to feel indebted. They're made to feel indebted by their university, by senior doctors, by parents, by society. The world gets away with treating too many medical students and junior doctors like dirt, making them pay obscene amounts of money, in my case, making them work insane hours, bullying them in the workplace, giving them insufficient academic support, and more. Because what is the person in such a situation going to do? Leave? Huh. No one leaves medicine. Simple as that. Everyone had to go through this, so you have to too. This is what will make you a good doctor. I want to stress that I don't think this culture exists everywhere, in every doctor, but it's what I observed in my time in medicine, and even as someone who ended up leaving, it's one that I still suffer from. I want you guys to be aware of the fact that this came from a student who, after doing clinical placement, was so disillusioned with his degree that he decided to drop out. Now, a few things. This sort of culture in medicine is something that anecdotally I have heard quite a bit about. And again, a lot of it is anecdotal because the students that tell me this do not feel like there are measures in place where they can report misconduct, bad behavior, harmful treatment by superiors in a way that will still make, in a way that they will be able to address the situation without also possibly impacting their future careers. If I've learned anything about the industry of medicine from the people who talk about it, it's a very incestuous one where, the degree of nepotism goes very high. So if you burn a bridge now, you might be fucked in the future. I've heard stories of examiners going out of their way in an attempt to make students cry during exams, to break down. And again, to some degree, I can understand the argument that maybe they need to be able to deal with emotional hardship as a medical professional in the future, but I still disagree with that argument, because why the fuck would you inflict that kind of suffering if it's not necessary? And then I've also heard stories about senior doctors, supervisors, nurses at hospitals treating students on placement, like he said, like dirt, where they would, there are instances of being verbally abused over a simple miscommunication on the part of the health staff, or being berated for arriving 5 minutes late because of circumstances outside of their control. Okay, I get that you can make the argument, just leave the house earlier, right? And again, I understand impressing the importance of arriving on time. But I've heard plenty of stories of students arriving at a hospital for their shift early, and then the doctor that's supposed to be supervising them arriving 15 minutes late. So again, it's the double standard makes it all the more irritating, because this is the kind of treatment that they could potentially get away with. And also the idea of not being treated well by the by their superiors on the academic side either. There have been instances where professors in quotation marks, or unit coordinators of these medical degrees just don't seem to give a fuck about their students' learning, where they basically just treat their position at the university as a side hustle to sustain whatever dying dream they have on the side, when they neglect all of their duties as a unit coordinator. They won't answer student emails. They'll be really pissy when students try to ask them questions about course requirements or just specifications when it comes to certain exams, or asking for clarifications on how something was marked. And again, these stresses that come with your academic performance, these aren't life. Well, I dare say they're not it's not like worrying if you're going to be able to put food on the table or not. But this is, nonetheless, another form of stress that's adding up on the minds, on the shoulders of these students. And it's another thing that they don't feel like they have any form of recourse for. So, medical students equals military. Yeah, that comparison isn't too far off. Hospitals lecturing anyone about being on time is rich. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. It's going to be on about the isms and phobias that all the dumb crap instead of addressing the actual issue. Corruption from those top to bottom by administrators trying to tick the numbers. Yep. And I want to just touch on that a little bit. So, the reason why academia in the field of medicine gets away with so much of this is in large part because, like he says in this part of the statement, there is a massive aura of prestige that surrounds medicine as an area of study and as a career, right? Because, again, you have to try so hard to get into med. And it's glorified as a dream. Like, okay, I know it's kind of like a stereotyped meme, right? But if you're Asian, especially, and your parents are like migrants, everyone's heard of the thing where your parents will encourage you to be like a doctor or a lawyer. Because, again, objectively speaking, those are the degrees that have the most stable career paths after you graduate. And universities sell themselves on the basis of giving you a gateway to a stable and bright future career. For a lot of people, medicine is the epitome of that bright and stable future career. And so you have this problem where people don't have a way of complaining, but it's made even worse by the fact that, for the most part, a lot of them feel like they don't even have the right to complain because it's just the way medicine works. And that brings me to the next thing. The next thing that I want to talk about, which is, actually, I'll get to the super chat first. So, such a fucked up situation. The culture in medicine is so toxic. Doctors literally pride themselves on making those beneath them feel like shit. Thank you so much for sharing the story. You're seriously doing God's work. This shit has been bugging me for like a fucking year. I'm just glad that now I've gotten the go ahead to like fucking talk about it. So yeah, and on the topic of doctors treating those below them like shit, there is this real systemic culture of paying it forward, but like in the worst way possible, where if you were made to feel like shit as a junior doctor, you now feel like you have the right to do that to the junior doctors that are under your wing. So again, you put all of these things together, like, an inherently abusive system, higher requirements that you have to meet, no way of reporting misconduct in a way that doesn't also risk shooting your future career in the foot, and feeling like you're generally unsupported and alone. And you have, the perfect storm for making people want to just exit out of life in general. Junior doctors getting treated like apprentices do in shitty trades. At least as a tradesman, I can call my boss a cunt. Oh no, fuck, I probably got demonetized by saying that. My doctors have confirmed everything here. Yep. And that's the sad part. Because although a lot of this is anecdotal evidence, it's not hard to find the same anecdotal evidence, regardless of where you look or who you talk to. On the topic of getting no support, in Australia we have what's called the Australian Medical Students Association, right? And this is basically an organization that's supposed to look after or supposed to keep an eye on the mental health of medical students, or just the well-being of medical students in general. And when I say that a lot of the measures they implement to combat this problem do not seem to be oriented around student well-being, this is an example of what I mean. So this was something that they tried to do, I think how long? Yeah, 2023. So around this time last year, right? Or just about a month ago now. So basically what they would do is they would... the government invested in mental health first aid training, right? So basically what they would do is they would introduce a course where they would teach medical students around the country about how to recognize the signs of deteriorating mental health and how they could possibly treat these signs of deterioration. Now, again, this is emblematic of a lot of attempts at addressing this particular problem. because it's more focused around making medical students more resilient than it is about addressing any of the systemic problems that underlie the environment in which they are being trained. So, it just... this was actually forwarded to me by a medical student who I'm friends with, who goes to a completely different university to the one that we were talking about before. And he sent this to me, and the message that he sent was, what the fuck? What the fuck are we expected to do with this? How is this supposed to help us? And yeah, so this, when I first read through this, right, the only way that I can describe how it made me feel was just exasperation. This isn't like a fucking lice infestation in a monkey colony where you can just get them to groom one another for a few weeks and then the problem's fine. Like, we know, right, that therapy doesn't work when you're administering it to yourself. And, like, are you really expecting a bunch of burnt out students to be able to support each other through these particular issues? So, okay, Kiernoth, to be fair, being resilient is not necessarily a bad trait. Oh yeah, and I completely agree, right? Being resilient is always a good thing. My issue with this program, though, comes from the fact that that is their only approach to addressing these problems, right? So far, there are like no concrete systems put in place to protect students from retaliation if they were to report a senior for like misconduct or like, you know, any sort of like ill treatment. So again, you're making them more resilient, but you're not really doing anything about the environment that is requiring them to be more resilient. They're expecting you to turn into self-diagnosing, unfeeling workers. Exactly, right? And that is exactly the problem I have. Signs that you may be mentally unwell. You looked at a list of signs that you may be mentally unwell. Yeah, this is about as effective as treating a patient with depression by giving them a checklist of which symptoms they can identify in themselves, right? So, I mean, I get that they're being taught how to, like, in theory, like, treat these symptoms as well, at least on, like, a superficial level. But what the fuck are you supposed to do if you ask someone, are you okay? And they say, no, I've wanted to kill myself for, like, the past 3 weeks. They want slaves. Yeah, I'm resilient, but damn, I want some support. Exactly, right? And that's the next thing that I want to get into, because these students do not feel supported. If there is one line, one single phrase, one single sentence that I feel like could definitely become like an unofficial motto of medicine, and this is a phrase that I've heard without fail from every single medical student I've ever spoken to when they talk about any of the things that are a problem for them over the course of their degree. I've heard this from every single student that's approached me about this particular issue, these particular issues. One sentence that comes up without fail: it is what it is. That is genuinely how they feel. That is their only way of coping, is to just say, it is what it is. The guy who sent me that thing from the AMSA, right? He basically had like 10 seconds worth of like actually expressing some form of annoyance or frustration over it, and then immediately afterwards, as if some switch had flipped in his brain, he just said, it is what it is. Ah, well, fuck it. It is what it is. And this shit is fucking tragic, because this basically means that before they've even had the chance to take on the full weight of the responsibilities that doctors, nurses, actual, like, you know, medical professionals have to take on, they've already come to the conclusion that no one gives a shit about how they're doing, and no one has to give a shit about how they're doing. So, like, if this is the mentality that doctors and nurses are walking into their jobs with, and mind you, this isn't something that they apply to their patients' well-being, right? They still care a lot about doing their job well. You know, like all of the medical students I've spoken to care a lot about doing a good job. This is just the mentality they apply to their own well-being and health. And like, If you're expecting our future medical professionals to be able to sustain themselves off of this, what the fuck do you expect about the sustainability of medicine? Spencer, resilience is just tolerating abuse in this case. Exactly. And again, this is the mentality that a lot of medical students need to be able to just cope with the fact that their degree is stressful as fuck, and nobody who can actually do something about that, or is actually in a position to help, needs to care about it. And it's kind of fucked up that a lot of these people are only comfortable talking about this when they're talking about it to a friend or to someone who has expressed interest in this issue, who is outside of medicine. Because, again, they are really worried that just expressing that they are struggling or pointing fingers at, a thing or a person that's making them suffer is going to shoot their future career in the foot. Because when you do medicine, right, when you have to put up with long hours, grueling assessments, people higher up than you who don't seem to care about you, the only thing you've got going for you, because you don't have a lot of a life outside of medicine, from what I've heard, is your future career. The promise that once you get through all this shit, you will have a bright and successful future ahead of you where you won't have to worry about money or happiness. And that's just not the case. So, yeah. And when I heard all of this, right? When I heard all of this rhetoric around, yeah, you should be glad that you're here in the first place. Don't complain. Do you have any idea how lucky you are to be where you are now? Do you have any idea about how many people would kill to be where you are now? I thought it was familiar, and I think a lot of you will find that familiar too. Hey, you know where we've heard that rhetoric before? Fucking Hollywood. This is like the exact same kind of mentality that kept people shutting up about people like Harvey Weinstein for decades. So, medicine, at least, well, it's also quite similar to a few of the other companies that I've talked about previously. Right down to the whole selling you on the prestige and dreams part of it, and putting you in debt if you don't comply. But yeah, like, medicine is an industry that has yet to have like a Me Too movement or anything like that. Because, very honestly, right, it's plagued with a whole shit ton of like systemic problems that will require more than one person to address. You need at least a team spread across both students who are willing to actually talk in the open about their issues, and staff that give enough of a shit to try to do something about it, right? And this is like staff spread across both the academic and the clinical side, because just one without the other isn't going to do shit. Because if your clinicals are sympathetic but your academics are not, you still have to deal with like 7 years of hell before you have any chance of breaking out. But if your academic side doesn't cares while your clinic does not, your future career is, you have to risk your future career getting stumped. Spencer, it can contribute to malpractice. My wife was told she was drug seeking with her 2 slipped discs, but I was being a stoic man when... Yeah. So yeah, we can't expect doctors that are going to perform to the best of their ability or to the best of their potential when this is the fucking environment that we're that we're essentially raising them in. Because, and I really want to emphasize, I'm not a med student. Right? I don't have personal experience being on a clinical placement. I have never been yelled at by a doctor for not getting something right. I've never had to put up with the stress of having to sit an exam and, feeling like it was the end of the world. This is a privilege available to me as someone who does an arts degree, because since I know that there is a 50-50 chance that I won't be employed even after I get my degree, I don't give a shit about that kind of stuff. I just perform, right? I do the best that I can, and that is okay for me. It's also a side effect of the fact that I know that most of the careers in my area of specialization don't give a shit about your, your degree. They care more about your portfolio. So as long as I have that, I'm fine, right? But for med students, again, even though I'm not personally in this, I've heard enough, like, enough anecdotal evidence from enough different people. And these are people who are, like, different years in their med degree, different universities, all giving me information that corroborates what the others are saying. And what the picture that they paint is a fucking demonic one. Especially for people who we are expecting to be the most empathetic, compassionate individuals in our society. Like, medical professionals get paid a lot, and it's for good reason. Because whenever you go through hell, they are obligated to go through it with you. So, it's just, yeah, it boggles the mind. I hate this kind of approach from the bottom of my soul. I've chased countless it'll get better once I reach this ideas, and none of them have made me happier, if I ever reach them at all. Yeah, I mean, like, purely from a psychological standpoint, like, if you set goals for yourself, once you meet those goals, your brain has a tendency of setting your expectations even higher. But in this case, it's objectively like what you said, right? Where a goalpost is put in front of you, and it's not even a real goalpost. The person who starts it will have to be the Jesus of the medical field. That's the thing that I'm the most worried about. Because of what I talked about earlier, this issue only tends to get attention when someone actually takes their own life. And, like, why is that the threshold we need to reach before more people start talking about this? And I'm not putting the onus about talking on this on the medical students, right? They've done more than enough by just surviving this environment. I'm talking about, like, fucking academics who are aware that their students are going through these struggles. I'm talking about senior doctors who have gone through the same struggles in the past and may or may not be observing those same struggles being, like, you know, that their students are now, their mentees are now going through, right? And this is just, for modern journalism, this is not an issue that is worth their time, and this doesn't have enough eyeballs on it. So yeah. Kenneth, paramedics, EMTs get treated like cattle too. Yeah, I recently started watching Bricky. So if you don't know who Bricky is, he's a guy who does game reviews. He got really big off of doing Warhammer lore summaries, I think. And I think he used to be an EMT or like a firefighter. And he has several moments where, like, in between, like, on his streams, or like several moments that I've seen from, like, clips and stuff, where he talks about how shit he was treated while being, like, an EMT or like a firefighter or something like that. So again, this is not a problem that's unique to, like, just medicine. This is not even a problem that's unique to just Australia. This is a thing in general, but I'm only talking about it in reference to Australia because, one, that's the problem that I have receipts for, and two, that's the problem I've heard the most about personally. So yeah, my brother-in-law's an EMT. They have a high churn rate. It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me at all. And I'm really convinced that the only reason med doesn't have a higher churn rate is because of how much sunk cost fallacy is associated with that fucking degree. Where even if you spend, like, 2 years doing it and you pull out after your second year before you even hit, like, placements, the sheer amount of work you had to do in high school to get an exam, like, you know, to do well enough in your exams to get in, will probably convince you that it's not worth dropping out, even if it really is the degree that you don't see yourself doing for the rest of your life. Which, again, the ability to pull out of a university degree and to, you know, go into something different is integral to just the fairness of, well, what little fairness there is in the way that academia is being run. Because, again, when you go into university, you're, like, in your late teens, like 18, 19, early 20s at most, right? When you first go into university, I mean. And, like, yes. Okay, so this is something I want to address with the earlier thing about the, you know, the bonded medical scheme as well. These participants are signing these contracts. They are, in the overwhelming majority of cases, over 18. They are legal adults. I am very aware that they are legal adults. But still, to expect them to be able to make this decision, a decision this heavy, that early on in their life, is just, I think, unreasonable. Because if you ask anyone who's above the age of, like, let's say 22, they'll tell you that like an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old, despite being a legal adult, is like practically a baby when it comes to making big life decisions. And again, with the medical bonded scheme, the idea that you can make a decision about whether you actually want to be a doctor/nurse or not before you've even had a chance to go on placement is just insane. So, yeah, doctors who speak out on systemic issues are demonized. Oh, yeah, they are. So, okay, like, at the same time, I do say that, like, I am convinced that if enough doctors talk about it, then it's like, then it'll become something that can't be ignored. But at the same time, like you said, Spencer, it is a very reasonable concern that they have, that they might not be able to have the same sort of, like, as lucrative a career after speaking out about it as, before they did so. Because like I said, there are no systems for transparency or protection of complainants in medicine, from what I've heard. And this just goes towards enforcing a cone of silence around the entire issue that we've been talking about up till now, right? Yeah, I'm there, an adult. Yeah. They're giving their souls to the cause, literally, if they are going through all this. Yeah, and that's why I make the Hollywood comparison, because yes, they're not selling their bodies in a sexual way, or at least from what I know, they're not. But they are still selling their bodies, right? They are giving the entirety of their life over to this degree. In every single instance of the student that I've spoken to, they take this degree very seriously. And as a result of that, they dedicate hours of their life, sleepless nights, plenty of mental and psychological strain just to get through it all. And again, I want to bring your attention back to the fact that at the end of all of this, right, they are essentially being treated as assets by universities to lend out to these clinics, these healthcare facilities for labor. So these universities can get funding or a grant or whatever, or to improve this, some statistic when it comes to rural healthcare that the government can then use in its next election cycle. Like, all of this is, like, again, in theory, there's nothing wrong with all of this by itself. But the fact that all of this comes with a neglect of how those medical students are doing is criminal. So, yeah. Also, why the idol industry is predatory, because it takes advantage of those 18 to 19-year-olds who don't know better. Yeah, exactly. And university is very much the same thing. There is, again, this isn't anything official. There is a real cultural stigma, at least here in Australia, against taking a gap year after high school to actually make the decision of what you want to do with your life. Very many people are incentivized to immediately jump from high school graduation into a university degree the next year after they graduate. So, again, these are like 18, 19-year-olds who really can't be making, well, okay, I don't want to say can't, but who really can't be expected to be able to make life-changing decisions with as much, with as informed a view as someone older. I'm holding on to Japanese songs, friends, anime, and my dad. Like, I'll be lucky if I survive university. Jess, I hope you survive. I hope you survive, because, I hope we all survive. I hope we all survive. Don't. University's it can be a fucking shithole sometimes, but life exists outside of it, and it would be a shame for you to miss out on it. Same in the US, same in Latam. Okay, yeah. I suspected that's how it would be. I suspected that there would be people who relate to this despite being in a different country. But it's kind of like that kind of thing where you anticipate it and dread it at the same time. The current state of academia, if you don't have a clear path of field and a career defined, you really shouldn't be going at all and attempt a trade school instead. I agree. But the problem is, okay, so academia, as it is right now, is sustained off of the backs of three things: FOMO, migrants, and a monopoly over knowledge. We are never getting rid of FOMO, because that has been deeply ingrained in just general culture, right? Okay, give me a second. I'm going to take a drink of water. I think I'm dying a little bit. Oh, fuck, it's gone cold. Thank you, Archie, for your support. No problem. I hope you get through it. Yeah, so we're not getting rid of FOMO. Every time someone famous who graduated from a university, and it doesn't matter how irrelevant their degree is to why they got famous, they will be invited back to give a speech, and they will probably accept that invitation. Because, again, they're giving a speech. It's good publicity for them, and it's good publicity for the university. So every time there's a success story, we're going to have that just shoved in our face. It doesn't even matter if they graduated from a university. I'm pretty sure wasn't there a case where like some university like gave Taylor Swift an honorary degree, whatever the fuck that means, just to have an excuse to invite her over to give a talk? So again, like if you graduated, they're going to invite you back. If you haven't graduated, they'll still invite you regardless. I think a university even opened up like a Taylor Swift degree. Again, whatever the fuck that is. But yeah. So we are never getting rid of FOMO, right? It's deeply in the minds of like both people who just graduated high school and their families, like their parents. And this is where we get to the second thing, which is migrants, right? For the overwhelming majority of migrants, especially Asian ones in my experience, they will view university or higher education in general as the ultimate gateway to a better and stable future. And that is a really hard thing to untangle and dispute because it's so deeply ingrained in, like, you know, their minds. One more thing is, aren't you for government dollars? Yeah. We'll get to that in a second as well. So, yeah. And then third, monopoly over knowledge. This is part of the reason why I do what I do, is because I feel scammed. I feel like I've done years of a degree and kind of been cheated out of a cathartic end to it. I feel like I just feel really disillusioned with my fucking university degree. So I've done again, I think I talked about this in my last stream, but I'm in a position where I deferred at the end of last year, where I've done all of the components of my degree that are essential that are essential to my areas of study. But my degree has stipulations that I need to complete additional units that aren't related to my areas of study just so I can graduate. And again, I feel fucking cheated, which is why part of the reason why I'm doing this. Because, okay, as fun as it would be, I'm not really keen on smashing up a classroom or blocking roads or spending a night in a jail cell. So instead of doing all of that, instead of smashing up a classroom, I'm just going to spit on their monopoly by doing this. So yeah, me 3. What did I major in? Theater and media studies. Actually, this is a little side tangent. If you do media studies and you're looking for a double major, if you're convinced that you are capable of doing a double major, and you're convinced that you will get a good deal in whatever university you plan to enroll in, if you don't know what double degrees to do, media and psychology is a great combination because from what I've seen of the content of other people who have graduated in psychology, actually, this past week I've been like I've been working on like my next video like consistently throughout like the past few weeks, but over the past week it's been especially rough. Like I said before, we actually like properly started stream because there's been so much content. But I've also recently started watching Lucy Pyre video essays and Savvy streams. I think both of them are like either in a psych degree or have graduated with a psych major. And like their content is like just the right balance of like degenerate, or actually in Lucy's case specifically, it's like the right combination of like entertainingly degenerate and very educational, which is basically fucking crack for me. But like, yeah, From what I've seen of like other content creators that are making like informative content based off of having like the knowledge that you gain from doing a psych major, there is a lot of overlap between what you learn in psych and what you learn in media, and they're really synergistic in terms of the concepts that you learn. Same thing goes for media and theater, which is what what I've done. So again, a lot of overlap in concepts, and a lot of those concepts like complement one another when you're trying to understand like the way the world works, essentially. So yeah. Watching the channel Pete Judo, he's a scientist who discusses instances of academic corruption and fraud. Vic is a bit better with direct rural training funding. Okay, interesting. I would be interested in knowing how the other states are doing when it comes to like rural clinic funding, or how the government does this stuff in rural. Does this in terms of universities among other states. But yeah. So what was the other one? Fuck, I forgot. There was another a physics professor, a German physics professor whose videos I started watching as well, who had a video blow up about how she was quitting academia because she's sort of so disillusioned with it. I forgot what her name was. Shit. It might come to mind like later on, but anyways, so long story short, right? Academia is really it's really not it sometimes. Don't be convinced that academia is the only way you can be successful in your life. But I've spent all of this time talking about medicine, talking about exploitation of medical students, talking about a degree, an area of study that I have no personal experience in. So I want to talk about something I actually do have personal experience in. And that is doing an arts degree. So, a lot of universities, and I'm pretty sure this is the case like universally, not just in Australia, where universities will have a certain number, a roster of corporations or organizations that have a business partnership with the university. And this business, yes, Sabine, yes, her. Okay, yeah. So yeah, they will have a collaborative partnership where, at some point in your arts degree, you will have to do a group project unit, right? And essentially what happens is in these groups, these corporations that the university is partnered with will come forward with problems that they want solved. And your subject for that particular semester in that unit will be, in your groups, to solve that problem or try to come up with a solution that these organizations can implement, right? So, the thing is, right, generally speaking, this is like internship light, right? You get some experience working for a corporation, and in return, we'll get to what you get in return later. So, usually these group projects are absolute plagues upon your university experience because you get one of three extreme outcomes. Either you are an absolute chimpanzee, you get put in a group where people actually care about whatever problem you're supposed to solve, and you spend the entire semester kind of bludging the subject and getting carried by everyone else. Or, even worse, you are the one human being amidst a crowd of chimpanzees, and you have to do your best, grow an extra pair of arms, and carry this project to completion just so you can pass. Not to mention that your feedback doesn't actually do anything. It doesn't really, well, it might impact their grades at the end of the day, but probably not enough to actually stop them from graduating. On a slightly different tangent, and this is something I brought up in like my last stream as well, I really do believe that you should have an MMR system in group projects for university where they collect all of your student feedback forms at the end of each subject, and they give you like a score where people with really low scores beneath a certain threshold can only ever be put in groups with other people with similarly low scores in group project subjects. But yeah. Anyway, so this is like the second extreme. The third extreme, and this is the ideal scenario, at least on paper. You get put with the Dream Team, a bunch of people who not only are just as competent as you, but just as motivated as you as well. You communicate well, you share a vision, and you have the resolve to get shit done. I've experienced both of these extremes, by the way. Thankfully, I haven't been doing this, but yeah, both of these they are interesting in different ways. Now, the problem is, regardless of which of these three extremes you become a part of, you never really win. Because if with these two, it's pretty obvious why. In this case, you are the problem. In this case, you have to, bear through a problem. But with this, in the case that you come up with a solution, well, this can end in one of two ways. Either the solution you make is not that exceptional, in which case, you graduate, you get those credit points, you leave the course, you're fine, right? And the corporation leaves being kind of nonplussed, not really caring, whatever, right? Or you come up with an idea that is so good that it might actually be implemented, but you might not actually get anything in return for it. And this is what brings me to the next part. So, when you do these group projects, before you start on any of these projects, you have to sign something called a deed poll, or basically a contract. Now, these contracts are necessary to sign. You can't do the subject unless you sign this contract. And this contract has two parts to it. One, which is basically an NDA, so saying that you won't disclose any internal information that the company reveals to you while you're doing your project, so you can do your project, which is, again, fair enough, right? And again, I'm pretty sure this is a surviving contract, so even after you finish, you can't disclose this information. And the second part, though, is that anything you make over the course of your project has its intellectual rights transferred over to the company that is, partnered with the university while you do this project. And normally, right? Normally, if this was a unit that I don't have a problem with this with this contract being compulsory to sign to do that unit, if it was an optional unit, right? If this was an optional unit, it was your choice whether you did it or not. Yeah, fair enough. You know what you're getting into. You just sign away your property rights, whatever, right? But the problem is, if you want to graduate, you have to do at least one of these subjects if you do an arts degree. Which means that you're kind of in a bit of a lose-lose situation. So either you don't put in any effort at all, and if you actually care about whatever you put out, then I guess that's kind of rough. Or you do care, you do something great, and it just gets yoinked. There is no stipulation that they have to compensate you in any way, shape, or form, right? So they just get whatever you make for free, and they don't have to even acknowledge that you're the one who came up with it. They don't have to credit you in anything, right? Look, if there's anyone who's watching this, if you're watching the VOD or you're watching it live, right? Anyone in my audience, if you're doing an arts degree, if you're in the later stages of doing an arts degree, just become a stripper. The work is more intellectually honest. The exploitation is less degrading, and you get paid money for objectifying yourself. So, yeah, but anyways, so not only is this a compulsory subject if you actually want to graduate, but it's a compulsory degree, it's a compulsory contract that you need to sign if you actually want to be able to do the subject. Now, that's not to say that there are zero incentives for trying your best, right? So I basically did one of these subjects where there were two incentives. One, the subject was, it was one where we were paired with a pretty big news broadcaster in Australia. Two, the subject was double weighted, which means that it was a single subject that you did that would count for double the amount of credit points that a single subject usually does, right? So, or become a VTuber. True and real. Although, I will say that there's a good chance that strippers get paid more consistent money than VTubers. But yeah. So yeah. So that was the first incentive, right? Big well-known partner, double-weighted unit. The other incentive, and this was more unofficial, was that our unit coordinators told us right when we were like at the beginning stages, first 2 weeks of starting this unit in semester. They told us that if we did particularly well, if our project was particularly helpful to this corporation, we would get letters of recommendation. Basically, a reference letter that you could put into your resume. And, of course, as somebody who was at the time looking to enter traditional media industry after graduating, this got my attention. Because, let's be honest, the last thing that people are going to read in your job application is your resume. Especially if you're in media, right? And in your resume, the last thing they will read in your resume is the stuff you say about yourself. If anything, they'll look at your portfolio, they'll look at your referees, and then they'll look at your references. And then if those look good, they'll consider reading whatever it is you've written about yourself, right? But again, references are actually worth something. People say that being paid in clout isn't real. But just as how clout is valuable if you're able to translate it into something concrete on the internet, a reference is valuable if you're able to translate it into a successful career in traditional media. So, again, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind. We were told that we would get letters of recommendation if our project was particularly good. Now, this particular business partner, this media organization that was approaching us with a problem that they wanted to solve, right? They had a problem that could be summed up in one sentence. L plus ratio plus you fell off. Essentially, what was happening is they were trying their best to move all of their content online, right? But nobody gave a shit that they had moved online. They had no audience, right? They weren't pulling anything with their social media presence. And the specific question that we were assigned, the specific problem that we were told to look at is how are content creators taking over the areas of edutainment or news reporting or whatever that traditional media used to be responsible for, and how can this particular company emulate that success, right? So, quite literally, they were worried about getting ratioed by fucking content creators. And they wanted to get an idea of how they could get in on that action, right? That sweet, sweet audience. So, this was the issue we were faced with, right? And again, like I said before, this was the dream team. I had a bunch of people who were with me who were really motivated to get those letters of recommendation and who were competent enough to work together towards that. So, we did our initial research, right? We looked at the company's analytics. We looked at what their content was like. We did some analysis on all the different social platforms they were posting content to, how they were doing their content. They had tried content creator collabs in the past. They've done it fluctuates in how successful it was. So we looked at those as well. And we looked at the areas of content that they wanted to go into and how the conventions and stuff, how those were done, etc., as well as doing audience surveys among other young people, because that was the primary audience that they wanted to get at, right? Young people on social media, young people on the internet. So we did a survey of those people to try and find out what wasn't working. So, just talk behind an anime girl and problem solved. Unironically, I brought up VTubers at the end of this project to this company. But anyways, that's a different thing that we'll get to in a bit. So, at the end of this initial research process, and that was quite a lot of research, bear in mind, we came up with 3 main problems that they needed to address. The first thing, nobody knew who the fuck they were. In terms of exposure, they were getting absolutely blasted they were getting blasted out of the water by other content creators, individual content creators, etc. Part of this has to do with the way that they were doing collaborations, because what we realized was, even though they had tried to do collaborations with content creators in Australia that were decently big on their own accounts or on various media platforms like YouTube, like TikTok, like Instagram, they would host all of the collabed content on their own social media accounts that nobody knew about. So immediately you have a little bit of an exposure deficit there. The second thing is that people younger audiences especially, were turned off by the sort of manufactured tone that came across in the way that content was presented. A specific question that we asked was, why don't you consume news from traditional media outlets? And a large part of it was them saying, and I say this word for word, we don't like newscaster voices. And we don't like the fact that a newscaster voice is coming from a giant corporation. Now, I want to stress, newscaster voice on its own, not a problem. False ID does it. But the reason why it works with False is that False isn't a soulless corporation. When False does his like newsreader accent, right? It's like a part of his personal brand. It's his personal shtick. It has, it has sass, pizzazz, personality, all of which are devoid when it's a corporation trying to speak to you, right? So, so again, on top of that, there's an overall tone of artificiality. And part of that also comes from the problem of the way that they were editing their content. So essentially what would happen is they would post content onto these platforms, but they wouldn't adhere to any of the common like conventions in how that content was packaged, how that content was edited. So again, they would be posting like tons of videos and stuff, tons of shorts, but none of them would gain any traction because again, people would be scrolling through their timelines, and on the off chance that one of this corporation's stuff would come up, they would just go, "What the fuck is this?" and scroll right past it, right? So these were the three problems that we identified, and halfway through the semester, we were supposed to do a presentation where we told them about these problems. And that's exactly what we did. And at this point, the execs kind of like took notice a little bit of our group in particular. They were like, "Yep, you guys seem really competent. We all trust you to we all trust you. If you say this is the problem, this is the problem. Go and solve it, right? Go and show us how we can solve it." And so that's exactly what we did. They had three main platforms that their content was concentrated on: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Now, again, we were in a group of 5, right? So naturally, just to divide up the labor a little bit. So for context, 2 of us had experience with making content for these platforms in particular. One of us had, there was one other girl in the group who, prior to doing this unit, had been part of a program by the university and been put in charge of growing their social media account on TikTok and Instagram to help promote this program. Now, she did that very successfully, but at the end of that particular semester, I believe, or at the end of that year where she was asked to take on this role, the university decided to terminate that program, and all of that work just kind of went to waste, right? But again, the fact remains, she has experience with working these platforms. I have experience editing videos. I also watch a lot of YouTube. I've written essays about how YouTube videos are made, how they're supposed to be appealing, what makes YouTube an appealing platform to both creators and audiences alike, right? So this is something that I have a lot of experience in. So again, we are walking into this with 2 people that have at least a little bit of prior experience with how to manage social media content, how to make social media content. So, we divided each of these apps up amongst the 5 of us. So 2 of them would be handling Instagram, 2 of them would be handling TikTok, and I would be taking on YouTube. Now, the first thing I did when I started actual research, thou sayest. So she was the social media manager. Yeah, exactly. And she got kind of fucked over for that. But yeah, so as part of the first thing I wanted to do, right? Because I pointed out that editing was a problem. I wanted to take a specific video, right? And show them the difference between a video that was edited properly and a video that wasn't. So this was their YouTube channel at the time that we began this project. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you see something a little strange about this channel. False is not condescending either. Yeah, that's a big part of why false is like why false works, I guess. Wait. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yep. This was a channel with almost 400k subs, almost 3k videos, and at the time, their videos were pulling in routinely less than 1,000 views. Now, again, I do want to say, if this was another creator, I would not be doing this kind of number shaming. But this is a media corporation, right? This is a media corporation worth billions of dollars. So, like, this is not okay. Something is going very wrong here. And I took some of the content and I realized what was going on. So essentially, there was a twofold problem. One, half of their content was completely unedited, right? So it was basically like someone talking to camera with like no live chat, no like sort of like viewer interaction or anything like that. Just like footage of them talking at a camera, unedited, right? Just uploaded wholesale to their channel. And of course, that's not going to do well. Like, what are you thinking? The second thing is, even when there is like some level of like movement or like some sort of dynamicism in the shot, all of that was done in camera on site. So one of the initial reactions that I got when we showed this content to other people of our age, right, was I feel fucking seasick, because instead of like doing the normal person thing and editing in post so that the camera moves around, they would try to move around the camera while they were filming. So you would just get like this sort of like, again, it's not a problem, but it's just very different to what you're used to seeing on YouTube, right? So what, Lamau? There was no editing. Yeah, there was no editing. So So I took it upon myself to take one of those videos and re-edit it, and then show it to them on the day. Give them an example. And while this was going on, like, you know, this was a video that had, you know, your usual like cuts, pans, zooms, vine booms, a whole bunch of sound effects, memes, whatever, right? And yeah, so I went and did that. So at the end of the day, right, at the end of the semester, when we had to like put all of what we've come up with together, we basically suggested that they fix these three problems in the following ways. So first off, right, regarding the first two issues, that they have not enough exposure and that they're not relatable enough to their audience, right, we decided that they were already doing content creator collabs, which was good, but they needed to change the way that they were doing them. Instead of just doing content creator collabs where they would host the content exclusively on their own social media accounts, we suggested that they adopt more of like an agency/MCN approach, where they would lend the only thing that they do still have over, you know, your smaller content creators, which is equipment and personnel, that they would lend these services out to content creators in return for being credited in the content that they posted to their own channels, right? This is the equivalent of Boomer. Oh, yes, it was. So, yeah. So that was our first suggestion, right? Both of these situations to be solved through changing the way that they approach content creator collabs. Because again, content creators have that relatability that these corporations struggle to have. And also, they don't need exposure from these corporations. Either pay them money to make content for you, in which case, like, you know, that's what they were doing before, but the problem is they had lack of exposure. So either pay them money or lend them the equipment and get your name out that way, right? Ironically, through exposure. Because if you have a bunch of Australian creators that say that they were able to make the content with the help of this corporation, then naturally their audience will become aware that this corporation even exists. So that was the first part of our solution. Second part, a complete overhaul of the way that they were editing the content that they were posting online. And this is where I came in, right? So in our final presentation. This is such a surreal thing to think about, because it was just like me standing up at the front of like a lecture hall talking to a bunch of fucking suits and execs about memes in video editing. It was just me like lecturing them on the value of using a vine boom or cutting away from text before people even have the chance to read it in the middle of a shot. So that particular memory is one that I particularly treasure when I look back on the things that I've done in my university degree. But yeah, so it was basically just like me explaining, okay, this is how you can improve your editing. This is why it sucks at the moment. This is how you can make it better. And the entire thing boiled down to hire an editor. For fuck's sake, hire an editor that can edit for the internet, for YouTube, for TikTok, and not for like television. Because the two editing styles, completely different beasts. I've been taught how to do both, but I mean, like, obviously I favor the first one a bit more. So, yeah. The DNA of the soul. Yeah, that was basically me. That was basically what I told them. Now, it does need to be said that the way that I speak might come across as a little, like, sardonic, a little critical, right? The presentation was, like, good, right? And our unit coordinator who was there at the time did assure us that it was, like, good. But she did pull me aside at the end to say, like, your presentation was great, your delivery was awesome, but you didn't have to go so hard on roasting them about their content. So maybe on some degree I did accidentally go a little too hard. I didn't say like anything. I didn't insult them directly, right? I just said, you know, your content, from all the criticism or all the feedback we've been getting from our audience, was just, you know, that it was boring, right? that was pretty much it. But again, I understand that particular criticism. To be fair, my tone of voice does lend itself more to like being a little like roasty, sarcastic kind of like tone rather than anything else. They got very possibly. So yeah, we did this presentation. We got a standing ovation, a pat on the ass. We got told that we did a great job by the execs. And at the end of it, we were told about what we would actually get out of all of this. Because we were the group that qualified for those letters of recommendation. The only thing that we weren't told is that these letters of recommendation weren't going to come from the organization that we'd been doing this for, but from our unit coordinators. Now, I don't want to make it out as if these unit coordinators are like nobodies. They have decades they are like retired professionals who have spent decades in Australian traditional media industry, right? They have some form of industrial clout. But their letters of recommendation aren't going to be worth nearly as much as one from one of the largest broadcasters in Australia, or an exec from one of the largest broadcasters in Australia. And again, this letter was a large part of the reason why I even bothered to do all of this in the first place. And I get that, like, you know, I get that it probably wasn't on purpose that they tried to, they probably weren't trying to mislead us on purpose, but it really felt like a punch in the gut to be told that. Also, one other thing, and I thought this was kind of funny. So, for context, in each semester has like its own census date, which is, like I said before, the date where your studies are locked in, where your debt can no longer be refunded, etc., right? For us, in this semester, our census date was in week 5 of that semester. So, because this is a subject that requires a deed poll, we had to sign this contract and turn it in before week 5 in order to actually do this subject. Before week 2, actually, to do this subject. So, by the end of week 5, we were locked into doing this course. On week 6, we had a lesson where our lecturer emphasized the importance of reading through contracts before you sign them. And it was just really funny because the moment she said that, you could hear like the slightest trace of the softest snicker ripple out throughout the classroom, because all of us knew this. We had all been essentially forced to sign a contract that we had no choice in, and to give us this lesson 1 week after we could no longer take it back was really rich. So again, this wasn't like, I don't think this was on purpose. I think it was just a case of being oblivious and, painfully unaware. But it was just, again, it's like one of those moments that add up, right? To when all you can do is kind of just laugh. So yeah. So that happened. So yeah, at the end of the day, we finished this project. It's presumably very helpful. The company's grateful. We get our letters of recommendation, although not the ones we were anticipating. 2 weeks after our presentations are finished, 2 weeks after the semester is finished, I get a message in our group's group chat. It's a screenshot of a LinkedIn post. Basically, one of the execs had just posted an advertisement for a new creator program that they were launching, right? Where they would get creators to sign on, make content for that company, and that would be posted onto social media. And guess what other role was advertised in this call out? A video editor. Fancy that. So, naturally, we had received no word from the company afterwards, right? And by the way, I only found out that the letters of recommendation was from our coordinators rather than from the company itself, because after like 2 weeks of silence, I emailed one of the execs whose email addresses we'd been given to complete the project and asked if we could get a letter of recommendation for like everyone in the group. And he was like, nah, just go to your unit coordinator for one. So that's how I found that out. But yeah, so again, already a little similar to some of the stuff that we were talking about in our presentation, right? But it is worth saying, this isn't the first time that they've done a creator program, right? So I wasn't going to immediately say, yeah, this was totally a ripoff of what we suggested, even if this does make me very suspicious. But then I went to search it up myself, and I looked at some of the promotional material that they were releasing on social media to attract content creators. And they had done a short where, and this is the smoking gun, that it actually was inspired by what we were suggesting. They had an advertisement where they were basically doing like a little skit where a creator that they had already collabed with was like, acting out the motions of what it would be like to be part of this program. And they had a section at the end where the creator was talking to camera behind a news desk, and someone off screen says, word for word, no, say that again, but without newscaster voice. And that was the moment where we all collectively went, okay, what the fuck? Because we, again, no credit, no letter of recommendation, and this has all actually been used in their promotional stuff, if not being used in the program itself, right? So, yeah, that's how that ended. So, again, after all of this, right, understandably, I would say, I was a little disillusioned with my degree. But it wasn't until like weeks after that semester that it fully began to sink in just how little I had come to care for my degree. Because again, like I said, on paper, I had completed the necessary components to say that I have the knowledge that my degree should be giving me. But I still had units that I needed to finish in order to satisfy the requirements of my degree. So it was at this stage that I kind of had a moment where if I'm being completely honest, got a little lost. I had a bit of an, and this is something that every uni student can probably relate to especially towards the end of their degree. I didn't know what the fuck to do with my future. Because, like, once you do this, and this is pretty, again, like I said, I'm sure an internship isn't going to be exactly like this, but this is what it's like to work in the traditional media industry. And after going through this, fuck no, I wasn't going to do that. I mean, that's common bait if they know what you want. Yeah, that is. I did have a bit of an identity crisis. Because here's the thing. The hard part about doing a media degree is that almost everything you learn, and I mean the things that are actually part of, like, the media part of your degree, not like whatever fluff your university wants to tack onto your degree. Everything you learn is relevant to everyday life. Everything you learn is knowledge that can protect you from being exploited, manipulated, etc. by, gigantic tech corporations, news media organizations, or even just bad faith creators, right? All of it is important. But the more you learn, the more you understand, the higher the risk that you just check out of anything to do with traditional media, especially journalism. Because, like, if you have eyes, if you've been taught to see, and you look around, things are fucked. So, again, this was kind of a Joker moment for me, where I realized that I don't really want to work in media. I don't think I made a mistake in doing a media degree. Not at all. Everything I learned, I treasure. But this isn't it. I'm going to tell you something personal. And time to be an OnlyFans model. Okay, we'll get to that in a second. So, chat, I'm going to tell you something personal. And while I tell you this, while you listen to this, I want you to keep in mind that everything I say on stream in my content, regardless of how personal it is, how genuine I sound, all of it is just content. And you need to keep this in the back of your mind to make an informed decision about how emotionally invested you get in my content. The last thing I want is for you to become too attached to a facsimile of me that is created as a side effect of the medium I'm using to speak to you. So again, I just want you to keep that in the back of my mind. So, in my later years of high school, on 2 separate occasions, across 2 different subjects, I was told by 2 different teachers that I have a nice voice. And again, it's like one of those things in life where it seems really banal, really insignificant. But after hearing that, I decided that my voice was an investment that was worth sinking time, effort, and my future into. Hopefully, that has at least somewhat been evident in how I've done stuff. But I decided that a cool industry that I wanted to go into was radio. Like, even back then, before I even went into university, I had a distaste for journalism. I didn't hate myself enough to become a journalist. I also wasn't attractive enough to get groomed by a producer, so acting was automatically off the table. And I didn't want to be homeless more than I needed to be. So, I decided that I wanted to go into radio. And one of the ways in which I could I was considering, I was about to graduate. How should I go about getting into radio? And this is a story that might be familiar to a lot of you guys listening as well. But I was raised by my grandparents, pretty much. Single parent household, but with my grandparents on my maternal side helping out. And I had a very close relationship with my grandmother. She was an old Taiwanese woman. And in Taiwan especially, our family had come from a long line of people who had university education. My grandfather was the dean of a university back in Taiwan. So she very strongly believed in the value of higher education in, facilitating a stable future, a bright career, right? And again, the choice to go into university was mine and mine alone. But I did take what she said very seriously. I still do. I still do believe that what she said in a vacuum is correct, right? There's nothing wrong with what she said. So I chose to go into uni. First year, COVID happened. After COVID, I don't think anyone would argue that COVID has permanently, if not killed, then at least severely stunted both radio and TV. Because regardless of what you say, radio and TV were dying beforehand, but they are never going back to the way that they were before or after the pandemic. So that happened. At the end of my second year, in the second semester, my grandmother was diagnosed with cancer. This semester was the first and only time I have ever failed a unit. I have not failed a unit before or since. That was the only time. In my third year, halfway through the year, I got an email from one of my theatre professors personally asking me to take honors in that subject. I never replied to that email because that happened at around the same time that my grandmother was being hospitalized for the fourth or fifth time since her diagnosis. And when I was halfway through my fourth year, this was the semester right before I started this subject, my grandmother passed away from that cancer. Now, in that year and a half between when she was diagnosed and when she passed away, you want to guess what my average grades were in that time? Distinctions. Across the entirety of the time that I've been in university, I have been averaging distinctions every semester. And I say this not because I wanted to, flex or anything, but I want to really make it clear that for all the fucked up shit that was happening in my personal life, that was messing with my ability, that was messing with me outside of my degree, none of that stuff compromised my ability to absorb the opportunities or information that was given to me over the course of my degree. None of it compromised my ability to meet the requirements that were expected of me over the course of my degree. The only thing that it impacted was my tolerance for the bullshit that came along with my degree. And when I started this and after I finished this, I was left in a spot where, if I'm being completely honest, I didn't know what the fuck I was gonna do. Because on paper, I was supposed to be the kind of person who would take to academia like a duck to water. Oh, by the way, distinctions is like between 75% and 100% for your like grades. So yeah, on paper, I was supposed to be someone who would thrive in this environment. But it just didn't work out that way. COVID killed the industry that I'd been looking to get into. I had learned enough about media to become disillusioned with the way that it works. And I had lost someone who was both a large inspiration in, like, you know, me doing this degree, and someone who was never going to be there to celebrate me graduating. So I had nothing left. I had nothing left to fucking continue on with what I was doing. So again, I say this because I want you to know that regardless of how much you think academia is the way forwards, it is never the only way forward. Even if, on paper, you are perfect for academia, that doesn't mean academia will be perfect for you. You don't need to go through all of this to be successful. And even if you do slog through all of this, there is always a chance that you kind of burn out before you can actually tick all the boxes necessary to graduate with the piece of paper that you were sold on obtaining when you first joined. So, yeah. And okay, this is going to be like a little sappy, but I was in a rough spot. Like at this period in time. I was essentially someone who had lost all of my dreams. But after doing this for a while, like after like making videos on YouTube and having like these streams where I can like talk to you guys and stuff, I'm in the process of finding new ones, you know? And you guys are what allows me to do that. So even like I do intend on making more content, but like regardless of how that content does, right? I mean, the direction of the content will always be decided by me alone. But the success of that content will always be co-created with you guys. And regardless of how well it does or whatever the numbers or metrics say, I just want to say to you guys, I really appreciate the fact that you've given me a reason to consider new dreams. Because fuck knows academia is a pipe dream at this point. But yeah. Alright. So in terms of like the actual, like the main contents of the yapping, that about does it. On the top, actually, I'll just read through chat a little bit. It's important to remember that you can always come back to study as an adult. Yeah, and again, when I first went into uni, I was very much of the mindset of, I need to get this done all in one shot. I have one chance, etc., etc. And it's like 2 years in when you kind of realize that the only deadlines you have are the ones that you set for yourself. Because university is just part of life, and life has no deadlines except the ones that you give yourself. So, yeah, I do know that, like, part of the reason why I call myself armchair expert is because I'm not technically graduated, right? I don't have that piece of paper that says that I have, like, you know, a degree. But I do feel like what I learned is important for other people to know. And it's also helped by the fact that I have no small amount of spite towards the way that it was taught to me. So, yeah. A lot of the BS that happens, that entry pass from college isn't the only way. Yep. Piece of paper is becoming more and more worthless as we speak because way more of you young kids are in college. Yeah, that is true. So like too many of us are like, kind of diluting the effectiveness of this. And it's also the fact that like these universities will never pass up on a chance to offer you a degree that doesn't actually have career prospects. Like I said before, kind of as a joke, but the Taylor Swift degree thing is just like it's just the perfect poster child for that as a problem. So yeah, I mean, it's dead. Yapping, let's go. Yeah, this is the post show laughing. My dislike for academia and journalism is the reason why I watch you. I'm glad to hear that. Actually, speaking of, a few hours after I end this stream, I want you to keep your eyes out for an announcement because I'm going to be launching something that I'm pretty excited about. As small as I am, a tiny streamer, I am going to be committing to trying to give you guys a structured, pre-planned form of like stream. Well, not that that's not what I've been doing already, but I want to give you guys more like pre-planned stream content that can actually be like beneficial to you guys, so that I can spit more on the monopoly that my university holds. So yeah, degrees in basket weaving. Yeah. We're happy to help you so much. Yeah, this has been really wholesome. I cannot put into words how much this has like changed my outlook on things. Cause again, like for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have the ability to get what I know across in a competent way. Cause I mean, it's one thing to say that what you know is important. It's another to be able to make what you know worth other people's time. And this is the thing that a lot of like activists on social media kind of forget, right? Which is that, time is precious. It's the most precious resource in existence, which is why whenever you use these like quote unquote free platforms, you're not paying with money, you're paying with your time. It is you can't make time, right? Every time you spend time on something, it's an opportunity cost. Time is always a sacrifice. And when you think of it that way, your time becomes exponentially more precious. And that's partially what I want for you guys as well, is to be able to acknowledge that your time is precious. But what that also means is like, if you do have something that you want people to talk about, want people to know about, you have to make it worth their time. And that's just something that I keep seeing people forget, especially with all of the phrase educate yourself is so like, it's so intrinsically gross to hear. Because like, what is that supposed to mean, right? Yeah. Attention and 100 plus us for 3+ hours. Oh shit, it's been that long? Holy fuck. Yeah. I appreciate you guys sticking around as well, because I do get that this is a pretty niche issue, like, medical student mental health, specifically in Australian universities, even though I do suspect that quite a lot of it will overlap with issues in other areas of the world. But yeah, I do appreciate you giving me your time so I can like yap about this for a little bit. YouTube is more even playing field since SE Chat 2. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I like don't get me wrong. YouTube does have problems, and those are problems I will be digging into in the future with my content. But it is a lot more, I guess, fair than like traditional media if you're going in without nepotism. Although it does need to be said, nepotism on YouTube, just like anywhere, works wonders for a person's career, but it's not necessary. It's time spent worth it. I hate hearing that. Yeah, me too. Is it? Everyone's been a student. Yeah, no, yeah, you're right about that, Suma. It's Suma Night. I mean, watch Geordie's. This isn't that far off from what you're talking about. Oh, Geordie's content is like something I can only aspire to be. And okay, well, I say that, but at the same time, I don't really aspire to his content, because that's the kind of content that can very well get you turned into a statistic. So, like, I appreciate it. I would like if my content was able to reach that that level without also me having to worry about death threats or getting firebombed. Time flies listening to informative content. I'm glad to hear that. Quite amazing for making all of that. For making us here all this time. I love this. Hey, prime stream to listen to while I rim world. Based. YouTube is just like playing social deduction game. Yeah. Although, and this ties into something again. This is like an issue that I am going to talk about more in future, definitely. But I do feel like I get that so far it's like ingrained in all of us, especially if you actually want to make content, that you should always play the algorithm, right? You should do your best to figure out how the algorithm works. And it's not really useful to get pissy about the algorithm if your content isn't doing well. As another horror creator has found out thus far. If you know, you know. But I do feel like a lot of these social platforms should be more transparent with their algorithms, because keeping viewers and creators in the dark is a very real business strategy that is something that we are taught about in over the course of our media degree in our third or fourth year. It's one of those later, more advanced concepts that you start getting into, which is basically, so for the first 2 years of your media degree, you're taught basic concepts, which is how media works, the social theory underneath it, how news operates, stuff like that, right? And then in the third or fourth years, you get taught, oh, these are the reasons why everything you got taught in first or second year is being used to fuck everyone by corporations. So yeah, this is the kind of stuff that we get taught there, where the lack of transparency is very much deliberate, right? And it has a very real commercial benefit to these platforms. But again, that's something we'll get into at some point later on. This content can get you in a real pinch. Have you tried listening to Preacher of Horror? I've not. I might check it out after this though. Trying to game the semi-sentient mass of Indian code. Okay, but so it can be futile for quite a lot of people, but after I've had the first 2 videos do as well, so I started off with this YouTube channel with the goal of getting one video to 10k views over the course of this entire year, and I've been really pleasantly surprised by how you guys have made my content go so far. But I really do believe that while it is, more and more I'm starting to believe the talking point that luck, while it is a significant factor, is not the largest factor in whether your content does well. Because I really do feel okay, so I want to take this moment to shit a little bit on social media activists. So look, in my opinion, every social activist, before they get to make a post about make a call out post on another creator or on people in general for not talking about a social issue or whatever, should be made to start a new YouTube channel and get one video to 10k views before they are able one long form video to 10k views before they're allowed to say anything. Because part of making content on YouTube, especially if you want to make content that's going to fucking benefit your audience, part of that is accepting the possibility that regardless of how good you think what you've made is, no one's going to watch it. And that is a very real possibility. Because if you make content and you release it and it does worse than you expected, you kind of have to do one of two things. You either go back to the drawing board and try to figure out how to improve what you've made, or you try something new because what you've done already isn't working. And this is why I get so exasperated by, well, I say social media, but I really just mean Twitter. This is why I use Twitter only as a clout farming tool to funnel into the YouTube, because I really do believe that intrinsically, in the way that app is made, its architecture, its basic form of engagement, it's just shit from the ground up. So, I mean, the way I see activism being done on Twitter in particular is just so fucking mind-numbing. Spencer, I sent a message on Stream Elements. Jordan Shanks makes... Oh, I don't have my Stream Elements open. Rip. Jordan Shanks makes VTuber doxing drama look like kindergarten tantrum. Yeah. Although, to be fair, like, I do feel like that's a good, like, part of me, right? Because I do keep up with, like, what shit is going down with commentators who talk about, like large scale state level like crimes and corruption and stuff. And after looking at that, I do kind of look at all of this VTuber drama, and a part of me, like, even though it doesn't make me feel good, it is like bizarrely a little cozy to settle down to someone talking about how, you know, they had a personal falling out with somebody and realize that at the end of the day, none of these people have their lives threatened. Doxing, completely different issue. Whenever I hear of doxing, my blood fucking boils. But, like, if it's just like a personal falling out, like, you know, if that gets made into drama, I'm just here sitting there going like, finally, something that doesn't actually risk killing someone, you know? Because, yeah, when you're trying to expose, like, actual corruption, you automatically sign yourself up onto a death list, onto a fucking hit list. So yeah, don't you mean X? Oh, man. If any of you watch Atrioc, I haven't laughed as hard as I did when Atrioc was, like, reviewing, fucking Elon, when he was first reviewing Elon's change from Twitter to X, and just like everything that everyone has been saying is absolutely true with regards to that name change. It's hands down one of the stupidest marketing decisions that anyone has ever seen in the realm of social media or even just business in general. Like, Elon Musk single-handedly has the ability to, like, break the illusion that billionaires are inherently smarter than the average person. I love the shit posting on Twitter. Yeah, no, I agree. It's so one of the reasons why I keep going on about how, like, algorithms should be more transparent is because right now a lot of, like, the only way that social media is a good experience is if you are actively pruning and policing what shows up on your feeds. And it's really difficult to police that on your own because you're essentially just doing guesswork for all of your pruning, right? I don't even know how well the not interested option actually works on most of the sites that I use. For example, YouTube, Reddit, Twitter, Insta. All of these have, like, you know, a not interested in this content option, but they seem to vary wildly in how effective it actually is in preventing similar content from popping up on your feed again. And, like, what's the point in giving users tools if the tools don't do shit, and if the users have no way of evaluating how well those tools can actually be used? So again, that's, like, part of the reason why, like, again, transparency is at the same time, like, one of the most important qualities that you can have on a social platform, but one of the qualities that these tech companies that run them, like, it's anathema to them to, like, fucking add those features in, or just make it more clear to their users in general how their stuff works. So yeah. Fourth midstream ad roll. Is anyone else seeing this on YouTube mobile? Oh, you poor soul. The opportunity when it's fine to dead name something is with Twitter. Yeah, I mean, look, no self-respecting person is going to call it X when they were around when it was still called Twitter. I hate tailoring my own feed. I hate censorship. I absolutely hate censorship. Yeah. That's fair enough. But the problem is, right, and this is where we get into, like, a kind of, like, weird ethical debate where censorship, I am, like, again, personally, I disagree with censorship as well. But as someone who studies media, and again, this is something that I brought up in my last stream. So the way that algorithms are designed is that all of them are designed towards one thing, and that is homogenizing your feed, right? When it picks up, and this is the same regardless of whether you're on, like, TikTok, YouTube, Insta, whatever. the moment you express interest in one particular area of content, it doesn't even need to be content that's like a post. It can be an ad, right? The moment the algorithm realizes that you're interested in some particular form of content, it will start slowly trying to flood your feed with only that kind of content. And like, if the content you're interested in is like, for example, like really cool Bionicle builds, right? That's fine. Right, that happened to me like 1 or 2 weeks ago, where I liked a Bionicle post, and then slowly on my Instagram feed, all of it became like Bionicle builds, which again, cool, I like that. But if it's something like, for example, and this is the example that I used last time I talked about it as well, if it's like a humanitarian aid post, if it's like children getting fucking covered in rubble in Palestine, then obviously, you would not want an algorithm that works that way to start flooding people's feeds with that kind of material. Because you can say what you like about the importance of, advocating for / raising awareness about a humanitarian cause, but the emotional damage that it can inflict on people who only see that, or who see a high volume of that every time they go on social media, is real and documented. So, at the same time, yes, censorship is bad, but I really do feel like these websites, and again, this ties into the transparency thing, these websites do need to, at some point in the future, implement a feature where viewers, users, whatever, are given greater control over what they see. Actually, this was something that I thought about when I was there was I had a moment like 3 nights ago where I was just kind of thinking about like the issue of echo chambers on social media, right? Especially on like websites like Twitter, where you can get these real incestuous communities where everyone seems to think and speak and believe the same things. And I've been trying to think that's a Nui flashback. I really feel bad about them discontinuing Bionicles, man. Lego seems so soulless nowadays. But yeah, anyways, I was thinking about how echo chambers emerge on social media. And we often see, like, for example, it's no secret that the internet does seem to be a lot less intolerant of like alternate or different views, right? People in general seem to be more trigger happy on attacking those who do not share the same beliefs. They seem to be a lot more focused on isolating themselves among others like them, etc., etc. And a lot of the times, people blame this behavior on echo chambers. But and when they talk about it, echo chambers sounds like a cause, not a sounds like a cause rather than a problem that was started by something else. And I have my personal theory is that what social media has currently done to the human race, and this is the thing to do with, like, I don't think echo chambers are just a cause. I think they're also a symptom of something else. And that is, so what I think social media has done to the human race is that it's basically given us the equivalent of being stuck in a factory farming pen. What I mean by that is, like, it's an observed thing in animals that when they're crammed up into, like, a tiny space with a high volume of them in there, when they're trapped like that, they become erratic, aggressive. There will be cases where animals start lashing out at, like, the things around them. And again, people, as much as as for all of our complexities, whatever, we are still just animals. So in my eyes, the echo chamber thing is a rational response to an overcrowding problem, which, like, again, if you just say it aloud, it sounds kind of insane, right? How can you overcrowd on the internet? Because the internet is like a virtual limitless space. But the thing is that connectivity, the state of being connected to something or someone, at least in the way that I've come to think about it, is virtually identical to proximity, right? The equivalent of being on the internet is if you woke up the next morning and you found out that you suddenly had telepathy, right? You could hear what your neighbor next door is thinking at all times. You can't turn this off. And the radius of this ability is like at least 5 kilometers in all directions, right? So again, the degree of connectivity that social media has facilitated has given us that kind of condition. Yeah, like being trapped in a corner with a crowd. Yeah, exactly. It's a form of crowd crush, mental, emotional, social crowd crush, where, again, as a result of being overcrowded like this, I think that people building echo chambers around themselves is actually a response to that rather than like the other way around, right? So I don't think echo chambers on social media are caused by I don't think echo chambers on social media are the, you know, I don't think they just cause um, audience compression. I think they are a direct result of audience compression via connection, right? We weren't made to interact with millions of others. Exactly, right? The human mind was not built to comprehend the amount of information that we have access to every day from even just 5 minutes of being on any social platform. And I class YouTube as a social platform as well, because I mean the whole point is to like interact with other people and their content. So yeah, people more vocal. Yeah, there was a study that reported that when online communities are exposed to opposing views frequently, it can cause the community to intensify in its beliefs. Oh, interesting. Okay. Huh. I might end up looking that up later on after stream. But yeah, I've always referred to Twitter as loud texting. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I think it's pretty reasonable. No, but yeah, the way that Twitter is built in particular, and again, this is another topic that I will be talking about more at a later date, is that Twitter is designed for shit flinging and nothing else. Every conversation is supposed to be public. Every conversation is open for other people who you have no clue who they are to jump in and add their piece, right? As a result, everything on Twitter is also performative as a direct result of that design philosophy. So that's why when, like, if all you have to judge a person off of is their Twitter, if they come out and they say something like, oh, I really care about gay rights, you really risk that looking very pretentious or insincere, because when you log on to Twitter, right, anyone who's used it for like a while, because of like after using it for a while, you internalize how public everything is that you post on Twitter, and as a result of that, you start to view everything as slightly performative as well, even if you're not consciously doing that. So again, like, if you like, I also blame like the way that corporations handle June for this, but like, if you look at a post about something important to somebody, like, for example, like Israel versus Palestine, gay rights, or even just like any charity thing, right? If you see it on Twitter and you roll your eyes, that's not necessarily like that's not necessarily a fault on your part. That's inherently what the site is designed to do, or at least what it ends up doing as a result of its design. So yeah, performative shit flinging. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just the two phrases that I said just then, but like put together like in a better way. But what about their? I can't wait to see Twitter go after you. Look, if your main platform isn't Twitter, being cancelled on Twitter doesn't mean anything. If your main platform isn't Twitter and you haven't done anything heinous, being cancelled on Twitter is just free publicity. So, that's also why that's why I don't want to rely on Twitter for like anything but funneling attention into YouTube. Because like that's not a platform that's good for that, right? I don't know why, but I think I could make someone like upside down from everything that they post on Twitter. What do you mean by that? It's funny. I'm glad I avoid much Since I just go after artworks to view and mute to avoid conflicts, people just seem to want. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I wish there was a way for Twitter to implement a thing where you don't mute all posts from an account. You just mute like a certain kind of post from someone's account. Although I know that this is probably very unlikely to ever become a feature. Because, like, you do get those accounts that, like, post content that you find really, really funny. But also, like, also post stuff that you're not really into, right? So, like, yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, like, as a result of both being, like, taught this and as a result of using all of these, like, apps and stuff, I really do just wish that users had more tools they could use to control their experience on these platforms. But again, that's always going to be that advertisers end up making less money. So the platforms end up making less money. You can't filter specific words. Yeah, that's true. Armchair once again justify why VTubers aren't content creators. Look, if I go on Twitter and your main content consists of repost, then my response is always going to be get the original content ratio up. Because I don't want to see what other people have posted. I want to see what you've posted, right? If you have an interest, I want to see how you can, like, I want to see how you can manifest that, how you can express that. Also, like, I have a degree of respect that is reserved purely for people whose Twitter feeds and Twitter content consists of non-text based posts, right? So if I go on someone's Twitter, right, and again, this is like a stranger, someone who I've never interacted with me before. If I go onto their Twitter and it's like mostly images or videos, automatically I'm viewing them in like a higher light than if it was all text. So yeah. But the Twitter API. I rarely post on Twitter, but I have lots of fun lurking. Honestly, the more, like, when I was first starting off in, like, media, I was, like, very into the whole interactive content kind of thing, right? I viewed, like, audiences who actively interact with content, who comment, like, make their own stuff. I viewed those as, like, the pinnacle of being an audience member, right? Because you're making stuff. But the more I went through my degree, the more I started to feel like maybe lurking is, like, genuinely the healthiest way of interacting with content, right? And again, I know that all of you guys in my chat, I'm not saying that if none of you spoke in chat, this would be a very dry stream. I value all of your words a lot. But it does need to be said that lurkers have perhaps the safest form of content engagement available in all of the internet, right? And for that reason alone, I have started to change my mind a little bit about the quote-unquote best method of engagement as an audience member. Like, for me, right? Oh, also, this is something I wanted to briefly touch on as well. And I guess I'll touch on this because it's like I've finished yapping about everything I've pre-prepared. Over the week that I've been away, I have observed some behaviors that I think are pretty concerning. I know that chances are if you're still watching at this point in the stream, it's not you guys doing it. But for anyone who's watching the VOD or anyone who happens to like be in my audience, right? Please don't bring me up in other people's chats unless the streamer brings me up first. I want my content to be educational, and make no mistake, I am trying to use everything I've learned to make my content, right? But I also don't want to be turned into like a measuring stick that other people's opinions need to be like held up against. And also just in general, like, it's just, it can be rough if someone brings up like something unrelated to what goes on in the stream and that ends up like hurting the streamer as well. So yeah. Shout out to all the lurkers in this stream. Yeah. You guys are you guys are just as valued as the people who are chatting. Do not feel less for not saying anything. I value your contributions very much. So yeah, there's this basic VTuber etiquette. Yeah, I know, but it's just over the past week I have observed that it's a little concerning. A few things that have kind of made that a little bit of a worry for me. I get you will do. Yeah, no, and again, I'm very sure that all of like the overwhelming majority of you guys will not need me to say this, especially because chances are you've been watching VTubers way longer than I have. I only started like late last year or something. So this is stuff that I'm sure you would all know. But like, again, this is just for the off chance of the people who come across my VOD or something who might not be as familiar. Because at this point, the content that I make is not going to be centered entirely around VTubing. Like VTubing will still be a pretty big, it will still come up like occasionally. But I want to focus more on like the media theory aspect of what I know, because I do feel like that's the area of my knowledge that would benefit people the most, or I think the most people like need to know. Burn your lurker card. No. Yeah. My streamers have said the same. I don't know why people do that. Yeah. I usually just assume it's like people who haven't been watching VTubers for as long. Aside, like, and again, this is me giving the benefit of the doubt, assuming that they aren't just like nosy fucks who don't understand like basic streamer etiquette. But yeah, I only started last year too. Hey, been around since the start of Kizuna Eye. Holy fuck, you're old, Arcar. Or at least in terms of like content viewing, you seem to be pretty a veteran. But yeah, actually, yeah, I wanted to ask, do you guys have like any questions or anything like that about any of the stuff that I've talked about thus far? And I know that I'll be asking this and I only get like responses in the chat like a minute later. You're going to be used for Niji PR training. Look, if it means that they do less of whatever the fuck they were doing at the beginning of the year, that's a win in my books. Although I have a sinking feeling that if they become aware of my video, I don't think they'll take it seriously. I want to hear your guys' opinion on this theory of mine. VTubers are just the evolution of Minecraft YouTubers. You might need to be a bit more specific with that particular theory. Because, I mean, VTubers are... I mean, if you think about it that way, like, it's all just different variations of content creators, right? So, when you say Minecraft... When you say that they are an evolution of Minecraft YouTubers, what do you mean by that, Ariz? I've been watching VTubers since around Hollow Myth debut. Damn. To me, that sounds like a long time. But yeah. Honestly, I'm thinking about having a stream, like just a chill stream before I really get into like the structured stuff later on, where I just talk about how I got into like watching anime / VTubing to begin with. I think that would be kind of fun. Because, you know, every now and again on Twitter, I'll see like I'll see like a quote unquote normie go to town on like trying to like fucking shit fling about anime and stuff. And I'll look at that and I'll go, damn, maybe like a year ago, that would have been me, you know? You missed the good old days armchair where the VTuber community didn't call themselves that. It was just a bunch of weirdos. Objectively speaking, people are far better as individuals than they are as a group, right? Like, I get the appeal of, like, especially when it comes to VTubing and corporate VTubing, I get the appeal of like tuning into like what looks like a ready-made friend group and like watching their interactions and stuff. But I really do feel like it's like, whether it be like, you know, connecting with people over the internet or connecting with people in real life, people are just way more palatable when it's just like a one person, right? We get to see how they act when they're on their own rather than, you know, as a part of a group. Nice bait theory. It's okay to make content if you don't have the degree for it. Like me, I want to talk about the humanities of VTuber. Yeah. I mean, the day I start saying that you need a degree to make content, I want you all to like collectively shoot me in game. Because, like, that is just utter bullshit, right? Anyone can make anything. It's just a matter of, like... Okay, so I will say that as a result of having done my portions of my degree, I do have words that I could better use to describe the things that I observe. But anyone can observe shit. And if you have the skills to like express yourself, anyone can put into words in ways that can be understood by other people what they're observing. So like, yeah. VTuber that got me into this sphere was Yuko. Ah, fuck. Man, I'm sorry for your loss. The Yuko thing is pretty interesting because, I mean, if to give you a little bit of a, this is going to be like months away from this point, but I have planned like the next 2 videos I'm going to make. I'm currently still in the middle of finishing the script for the first one, but I am going to be making either a stream or a video on why parasocial relationships are pretty much unavoidable if you become a content creator. And how it's like, it's built into the fabric of what it means to become a content creator. So, yeah, it's interesting that you bring up Yuko, because she is, unintentionally, I think, not ideal, because ideal kind of makes it sound like it's a good thing what happened, but she is a very archetypical, I guess, case study of the impacts that parasocial relationships and how deeply ingrained it is in content creation, the effects that can have on somebody in their career. Us parasocial? No way. Why do you? Yeah. So again, this is like personally. Why? This is why I keep going on and on about like, whenever I say something personal, whenever I sound genuine, like you must approach everything I say and do through the lens of this is content, right? Because again, parasocial relationships, the platforms I'm using to speak to you guys are designed to facilitate them, right? So it's kind of like every time it's like trying to play an instrument while you're like trying to fight the instrument at the same time, right? It's if a violin had hands. So it's trying to like, you know, make content can sometimes be difficult for that reason. Is parasocial behavior necessary for online interaction? It depends on how maladaptive the relationship is. Yeah, I agree completely. Parasocial reaction isn't parasocial reaction. Yeah. So again, like, this is something I brought up before, but parasocial relationships themselves are not a bad thing. They are only bad when it's as a result of someone substituting real life interactions with a parasocial relationship. That's when it becomes unhealthy. And even when it's unhealthy, it is debatable whether it's bad, quote unquote. Because morally speaking, right, if having a parasocial relationship is the only thing stopping you from like ending your own life out of loneliness and isolation, there is an argument that is a good, like morally speaking, a good thing, right? I personally become okay with the idea of parasocial relationships as long as the boundaries are clear and established. Yeah, and again, at its like base level, like just the pure, the definition of the word parasocial, it just means like, imitation of social, right? And when I communicate to you guys, technically, since you're speaking to me and I can read your messages and respond to your messages, it is a social interaction. But it's only para in the sense that I'm doing it over a medium rather than doing it face to face. So that word in and of itself does not mean anything like inherently negative. It's just the way that it's come to be talked about in popular media that has made it negative. It also doesn't help that like, when you talk about parasocial relationships, most of the time, the people who end up gaining the most traction with their, with the way that they talk about parasocial relationships are content creators, which means that for a lot of them, they are limited in how complex they can, they are limited in terms of the degree of complexity they can give the issue as they're talking about it, because they are content creators. They, to some extent, and this will include myself, they are to some degree reliant on parasocial relationships. If streaming is like their main like thing, when it comes to, like, you know, pre-edited content, maybe not as much, but streaming, yes. Although it does need to be said that parasocial relationships originated in pre-recorded content because they started from like radio and TV, right? So it's not even a matter of you have like a visual stimuli to connect to. It's just, even if you hear somebody, right, as long as you view that as like another person who's speaking to you, that relationship has the potential to be parasocial. Where do we even begin with this BS? Parasocial behavior definitely should never be underestimated. Agreed. Any confusion, especially, I was talking about Yugo. Oh, Yugo awesome. Oh, sorry, I misread it as Yuko. Oh, my bad. Yugo Asuma. Yeah. Okay. Damn. So you were around when Nietzsche first began pulling its termination shenanigans. For example, if a chat member says something and makes the streamer laugh, that's fine as long as the boundaries are kept. Yeah. I mean, in social situations, right, making the ability to make someone laugh is a really powerful enabler of like social connection. Both the ability to make someone laugh and both the, you know, the state of laughing at something someone else says. So, like, it is like, it is interesting that is like a thing that exists in content creation, because for the most part, people watch and do content creation because they want to make other people or make themselves happy, right? Which automatically facilitates an environment where you have an audience and a creator, both of which are trying to make each other laugh. So it is interesting that, like, you know, you have that aspect of it as well. Yep, Yugo was an omen of sorts. Oh, I mean, this is a rat, and again, this is something I talked about in my first ever stream, but I think Yugo was more than just an omen. I think Yugo was like the test run of what they could get away with. In a concert, the band is separated from the crowd by the walls. It streams, both of these are gone. Yeah, exactly. The thing about all of these platforms, and I mean YouTube as well, like while I'm speaking to you guys, these platforms are designed to create a sense of closeness, to erase the idea that there is a barrier between you guys and me. So, again, when the main premise of your platform is closeness, you have a bit of a problem there, because that automatically makes it so that this is like one of the things that facilitates parasocial relationships, and why parasocial relationships are baked into the platforms we use, rather than just being like some random side effect that comes from the streamer or creator themselves or the audience member themselves. We have sample bias too. You don't really hear about healthy parasocial relationships. Yeah, exactly. Right? Because people who have healthy parasocial relationships don't really feel the need to talk about it. I never really watched VTubers until that happened, but I personally went down the VTuber news drama hole. Yeah, I mean, VTubing has no end to the amount of content it can provide for like news and drama. In terms of news and drama, I don't like calling, like, you know, false and stuff like drama tubers, because I feel like that undersells like the premise of what they're doing, which is to like accurately report on information. Like, I know that a lot. So okay, this is the thing where I've seen I've seen certain individuals go after false, saying that, like, you know, both claiming that he doesn't meet the qualifications of being a journalist, while at the same time stating that he should be held to the same standards as a journalist. I mean, like, at its core, journalism just means... Oh, okay, well, this is this is my personal opinion on what journalism means. Not what it actually is, if you like take a look around. But journalism is the ability to report on what's going on, to be able to make people aware of what's going on. Part of that necessarily means not being responsible for the things that you report on, like I said before. But again, as long as you have ethics in the way that you're raising awareness about stuff, Like, I don't see why we should try to gatekeep journalism or gatekeep just the action of reporting this way. And, like, sure, some people may say that False has, like, a Niji bias or a bent against Niji in how he reports on it. But, like, they tried to fuck with his career. Like, I don't see why that would compromise what he's reporting on, especially when all he's reporting on is them self-destructing. So, like, it's sort of a case of, if you don't want people to talk about something, you can't really protest when the thing that they're talking about keeps happening, and spontaneously too. So, like, yeah, it's about mods and meetups. Who cares about journos? Yeah, fair enough. Journos are they're a plight on the world. Activity or profession of writing for newspapers. Yeah. As I came to watch more and more streams, as I came to visualize the person on the stage or auditorium. Yeah. Oh yeah. Also, one other thing I want to bring up to you guys is, if I show up in like another creator's stream, right, and I say hi to them or I say something in chat, if you say hi to me, and I don't respond, it's not because I didn't see the message or I hate you or anything. It's just that when I show up in another streamer's chat, I view it, to me at least, I view it very similarly to being in like someone else's lecture. So for me personally, if I were to start having my own conversations with other people in the audience, I would view that as disrespectful to the streamer. And I'm not saying that I'll hold you guys to that as well, right? Because again, this is just something that I apply to myself. But if that ends up happening, right? If I end up like, you know, popping up in another streamer's chat and you say hi to me, just know that I see your message, but I'm probably not going to respond for that reason. I absolutely despise activism journalism. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because a lot of us, right, can spot that the journalism isn't being done because they actually care about the issue. Even if we don't have the words to describe it, people aren't stupid. If you take nothing else away from my streams, I hope you take away the fact that you're not crazy, you're not stupid, you're not, like, you know, you are aware of what is happening. You just might not have the words to describe it. Right? So that kind of activism journalism is purely profit motivated because it creates greenhouse conditions for them to just pump out more articles. So yeah, I can't believe the talking chair hates us. No. Well, in False's case, he should and does have beef with Niji Sanji. Oh yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, you pull those tactics to try and silence criticism, you deserve to be put under a microscope. Wait, are you talking to other chatters? Yeah. I understand, don't worry. Hey, I just feel like I need to say that, just so it's like on record and stuff. There's journalist ethics from my junior to senior activities. Journalist ethics is such a joke once you actually like get through a media degree. I really do believe that like somewhere down the line, we really fucked up with the amount of staff that these organizations, or just the gaming industry in general, hired. Not just developers, not just writers, not just salespeople, but journalists as well. And as a result of that over bloating, we have this abundance of just shit journalism. Because this is not journalism. This is the kind of shit you would see in a gossip mag. Like, come on, man. Is that streamers don't have to read my message? I'm fine with that. Yeah. Mob mentality is a thing after all. People are stupid, individuals aren't. Yeah, exactly, right? And I feel like there's, okay, and this is just me personally, but I see so much online of people telling everyone else that they're fucking stupid and they need to educate themselves and that they don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And I mean, sometimes maybe that's true, but like for the most part, if people have a concern about something and they're not just doing it because they're swept up in a mob, like, you know, in a mob movement, it's because they actually do have the sense to like pick up on stuff. And a large part of the reason why I don't regret doing a media degree, even though I'm disillusioned with media as an industry, is because doing a media degree convinced me that I'm not crazy. And it gave me words to describe the things that I've always thought and felt were true about just the way that media works. That's what my content is aimed at, like giving you guys as well. Okay, so I'd say hi in someone else's chat. It's with the intent to help the streamer notice you. Oh, okay. I mean, that's I appreciate that. Educate yourself. That was a little cringy. Current journalism is sometimes feels nearly indistinguishable from AI generated. Yeah, and it feels indistinguishable from AI generated content because there is no humanity in it. Or okay, this is not me saying anything objectively or anything from what I've learned or whatever. This is just me personally, right? There is no humanity in this kind of journalism. It's just you trying to make money. It's just you making something to justify its own existence, right? Because like Resident Evil 5 isn't fucking racist. It's not trying to convince you that black people deserve to be shot or anything. It's just because it's a game that involves shooting zombies and that happens to be set in Africa. And the majority of people in Africa are going to be dark-skinned. It's... yeah. Being condescending about telling people to learn is not productive. What is considered common knowledge is hugely dependent on different people and their backgrounds. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. General rule of thumb is that, yeah. Okay. Holy fuck, I've been streaming for like almost 4 hours. Shocking. Shocking. That's how I feel when I read most journalism nowadays. Okay. I might end stream here because I need to get some food. I need to get warm water so I don't like fucking kill my throat. So I'm going to keep you as my prisoners for a little bit because I did watch a YouTube tutorial on how to raid after the last stream. So I want to try and see if I can make that happen this stream. All right. So it's 6:48 a.m. Holy shit, Blaze. Are you all right? Feels like an actual lecture. I am a good deal less qualified than your actual lecturer, but if you don't mind that, then yeah, pretty much. Okay. I'm going to attempt to raid. Are there any Phase Connect members that are live right now? Actually, let me check. Armchair, some sleep at daytime. Oh, that's true. Let me search up. Now being flat packed and shipped. Who is live? Oh, Rie's live. Okay. Australian Solidarity. Hime Mia Rie. Hold on. What the fuck? Oh, shit. Okay, it works. Live redirect works. Holy shit, I've finally done it. All right, let me save this. Let me save the redirect. Okay, it's locked in. It's locked in. Aussie raid. Aussie raid. All right. So, keep an eye out on community tab. If you have Twitter, please follow my account. It's in my bio. If you don't have Twitter, don't get it just to follow me. I promise it's not going to be worth it. But yeah, keep an eye out because there's going to be an announcement in a few hours about a bit of content that I've got planned for the next few weeks or so. All right. Hope you guys have a nice rest of the day. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for listening to me yap about this. And I'll see you guys when I next have content.